Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, July 2nd, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live, steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Nisha Kapoor, author of Deport, Deprive, Extradite, 21st Century State Extremism. Also on the program today, over the weekend, thousands of people across the country protest the U.S. government's policy of child kidnapping. And south of the border, historic landslide as the left wins big in Mexico. AMLO. And I think 5 of 7 governorships. Meanwhile, the DOJ is planning to define asylum requests out of existence for Central Americans. Trudeau targets the GOP with his tariffs as Trump wants more tariff authority and proposes the FART Act. I'm not kidding. Meanwhile, Michael Cohen pleads with Trump for one last time. And in the run-up to Trump's Supreme Court announcement, Susan Collins pretends she cares about a woman's right to choose. New Jersey Dems finally pushed through a millionaire's tax. And it turns out North Korea sort of doing the opposite of denuking. And fortunately for Donald Trump, the Supreme Court nominee frontrunner happens to think presidents shouldn't have to face criminal charges while in office. Naturally. Worked out well. All that and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Folks, I want to get this out of the way right off the bat because sometimes on Twitter, maybe I am slightly just too dry for some folks. I want to put up a tweet that I tweeted 13 hours ago, wherein I wrote, I voted for GWB twice. That would have been George W. Bush twice. Burned Dixie Chicks albums. Voted for McCain only because of Palin. Withstood the Kenyan socialist. Voted for Mitt. He was not a taker. Voted against Clinton because of Vince Foster. Now it's time for me to hashtag walk away from Democrats, hashtag walk away to hashtag MAGA. Folks, this was a satirical tweet. I did not vote for George W. Bush twice. I did not burn any Dixie Chicks albums. I did not vote for John McCain, not the least of which because of Sarah Palin. I did not feel that Barack Obama was a Kenyan socialist. I did not vote for Mitt.
I had the worst allergies when I burned the Dixie Chicks. The smoke was in my face.
Smoke was in my face.
My friends from Texas were there, but they weren't burned, but I was.
I did not vote against Clinton. I do not think that she was involved in the murder of Vince Foster. I don't think Vince Foster was even murdered. And I was mocking the attempt to fabricate that there's some type of big hashtag movement on Twitter called Walk Away. And Dave Weigel posts via Place Boasis. Here's another fake account trying to make walk away, the hashtag, happen. 16,000 retweets for a woman named Sofia Vagoros, who wrote, "Both my parents are Hispanic legal immigrants. Both were registered Democrats, and both this week told me they have decided to hashtag walk away." 16,000 retweets, 45,000 likes, and it turns out Sofia Vargas is not a real person. It turns out Sofia Vargas, in fact, doesn't exist, but Sofia Martinez, she exists. That's whose picture it was, and she is the author of Penny Stocks. Exactly how to find penny stocks that can make you millions in the stock market.
Exactly how.
Yes.
Not loosely how.
Not loosely how,
Literally, this is how you do
but
it.
exactly how. What's up with your microphone?
I don't know.
There it is. Wait a sec. Try it again.
Test. Oh.
You get a little, okay. So there it is. So not so much walk away. It's sort of pennies, hashtag penny stocks. So I just wanted to make that clear. If there was any confusion for folks, I think probably if you see me claim to have voted for George W. Bush twice, or you know what, even once.
That was a graduate level joke, though, to be fair.
Was it really?
No,
it was
not.
I
That
think
was
it was
literally like
I think
that was a
like-
junior varsity joke. You're being way too
No.
generous.
I don't think that was the level of sophistication. I think was definitely a high school, maybe junior high level.
I'm
But
gonna stick with JV.
who
Junior
knows?
high,
I'm not sure you understand how JV works.
junior
but-
varsity sports teams.
right?
Yes.
That would not necessarily be junior high.
Really? High school kids are still in JV?
You can, as a junior.
Oh, that's terrible.
Wow.
I didn't go to school.
Oh,
I
this
go
is
to
that awkward time when we remember Michael was homeschooled.
Or what are you doing to the mic?
Folks,
Disgusting. I still host on Thursday.
folks,
Jesus.
learning a new language is a journey. It can be challenging, but it's ultimately one of the most rewarding experiences a person can have. The best way to reach your goal, whether that be a basic understanding or full-on fluency, is to immerse yourself in the language. Finally, there's a way to do that online from the comfort of your own home. Thanks to Live Lingua, Live Lingua offers immersive online languages via Skype. Their instructors are all native speakers of the language they teach. They work with you one-on-one. They don't offer some trendy new gimmick. 5 minutes a day is not going to make you fluent in a month, no matter what anybody says. But if you're looking to learn one of the 11 most commonly spoken languages, I wonder what those 11 are.
Arabic, Mandarin, Spanish. Those are definitely three. English, obviously, but that wouldn't apply to us.
No. French.
Yeah, French through
absolutely
Africa.
French.
Yep.
I wonder if you're like
Russia
Russian,
just by landmass.
maybe German. I would be surprised if it's German, but maybe 11. I don't even think I can name 11 languages off the top of my head.
Think of
Portuguese?
other colonial. Yeah, Portuguese definitely. Other colonial powers in Africa. That's where we would. Yeah,
I said Dutch.
Yeah, Dutch. Oh, you said Dutch. Okay, yeah, then Dutch is definitely there.
Well, nevertheless, folks, Live Lingua follows the immersive language method that diplomats and educators have been using for hundreds of years, but they do it online. So you can build a routine and comfort zone that works for you specifically. On Skype, students work one-on-one with their teachers, meaning there's no intimidation or, slowing down for the guy in the back end of the class. I'm not going to point any fingers. Their immersive method increases memorization and finally helps a new language be part of your life. We'd like to invite listeners to the Majority Report to check out Live Lingua's platform. You can sign up for a free trial lesson today at livelingua.com/majority. That's livelingua.com/majority. You get a free lesson. Check it out. You got nothing to lose. All right, and this is... I sat down with my daughter some time ago. I don't want her to buy that much stuff, but she's always sending me links of stuff that she wants me to buy, and I'm like, dude, did you check for a coupon? That was what would happen in my house for an extended period of time. Did you check for a coupon online? Just to try and teach her, like, why? It'll take you 5 minutes. And then it starts to get more difficult. And well, when you shop online, do you turn into a tab hoarder, loading dozens and dozens of new tabs in your browser in search of a promo code? Just one that works? That was me. That was me. But before you crash your browser, yet again, try Honey. Honey is the free browser add-on that over 9 million people are using every day to save money while they shop online. You add the Honey to your browser for free, and then you shop like you normally do. Honey scans and tests millions of coupons in the background, then automatically applies the best coupon at checkout. Time magazine calls Honey basically free money. Why? You save $5-10? Why wouldn't you do that? I just did that for, I'm not going to say the name of the card place, but we're all getting business cards here. We're upgrading, getting a little more professional. And
It's gonna be like American Psycho.
Exactly.
I saved.
Yeah.
I saved like $10,
and you didn't have to use your web browser like that.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's
Nice.
There's no reason not to add Honey to your browser today. It's free. It takes 2 clicks to install. It will save you tons of money. Get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/majority. That's joinhoney.com/majority. joinhoney.com/majority. Start saving with Honey today. joinhoney.com/majority. All right, folks, do we have time for this? Yeah, we do. Let's just do this briefly. Donald Trump. Now, look, I would be careful about passing around this thing on Facebook that's going around that my sister had sent me about Donald Trump and Anthony Kennedy's son, who just very coincidentally has a close relationship with Donald Trump because he was the one who signed off on a lot of his loans at Deutsche Bank. I think there's stuff there to look into, and there are people who are calling for maybe some investigations on just how this process went down with Anthony Kennedy. But I wouldn't get out ahead of yourself. The real issue for the time being is that Donald Trump is going to appoint someone to the Supreme Court who is going to change the tenor of the Supreme Court for decades to come. And not the least of which is going to be a woman's right to choose. They may not directly overturn Roe v. Wade. People I'm starting to talk to say they don't need to do that. They can simply allow multiple different ways for states to abridge a woman's right to choose, to effectively outlaw it, but not having to address Roe v. Wade head on. Not to mention that this guy, Brett Kavanaugh, who's first in line, supposedly at the top of the list, a former Kennedy clerk, after his experience working on Ken Starr's investigation, where they actually ended up getting Bill Clinton impeached because during a deposition, he lied about whether or not he had sex with Monica Lewinsky. He's now come to the conclusion that this is probably too much of a burden on a president. Well, here is Donald Trump talking about Roe v. Wade and his next Supreme Court pick.
Which means he had confidence in me to do the right thing.
Are you going to ask your nominees beforehand how they might vote on Roe versus Wade?
Well, that's a big one, and probably not. They're all saying, don't do that, you don't do that, you shouldn't do that, but I'm putting conservative people on. And I'm very proud of Neil Gorsuch. He has been outstanding. His opinions are, is so well written, so brilliant.
Pause it. Now, obviously, Donald Trump has not read a single word of those. In fact, it was reported over the weekend that Donald Trump wants his nominee to have extensive writing on legal issues. He's not interested in reading them. He just literally wants to see that they exist, because that's what's important. Yeah, I don't need the mucky muck gobbledygook, but if it's written and typewritten and it's
published a lot of stuff.
that's good.
Lots.
I even learned a few words.
Standing, his opinions are, is so well written, so brilliant. And I'm going to try and do something like that, but I don't think I'm going to be so specific in the questions I'll be answering. And I'm actually told that I shouldn't be.
Because on the campaign trail, you said you would leave it to the states.
Well, maybe someday it will be to the states. You never know how that's going to turn out. That's a very complex question. The Roe v. Wade is probably the one that people are talking about in terms of having an effect. But we'll see what happens.
Pause it. Did you follow how little of an understanding he had about Ollie? I mean, he was able to say the words Roe v. Wade and the words states, and that people are still trying to figure out how that has an effect.
It's very complex, okay?
He doesn't understand the concept of you have federal law supersedes, the Constitution supersedes law.
Well, a lot of people are talking about that whole principle as well.
That's right.
There's a lot of conversations going on about a lot of things involving federal and state laws. Things that are coming back, things that are going, but we're talking about it. And maybe I shouldn't say more.
Totally coming back.
Wade is probably the one that people are talking about in terms of having an effect. But we'll see what happens. But it could very well end up with states.
Yeah, there it is. Yes, it could very well end up with states.
Tune in to see what happens.
Yeah, as we mentioned the other day, Jeffrey Toobin predicted that abortion will be outlawed within 18 months in about half the states in the country, maybe a little bit less, which I think in one form or another. I mean, look, there's not that far to go for at least a half a dozen states as it is now, where they have such a restrictive abortion laws. But things like trap laws, where you require onerous licensing and issues like that. These are what you're going to see first. And there's going to be a series of cases. The day whoever this white man becomes the next Supreme Court justice, and I'm going to bet it's probably going to be a white man.
Yeah, I know North Dakota has one. I mean, this might have gotten better. I doubt it. But North Dakota has one clinic, and it's in Fargo, and they'll find a way to restrict that.
Absolutely.
And I would not be surprised if they also passed a law to make it illegal to cross state lines to get an abortion.
You know, that's what I have been asking people, if there's going to be a way of doing that. And supposedly it would be extremely difficult to pass such a law. But that was the first thing that occurred to me. If there could be a federal statute to that effect. But that seems difficult. But listen, they could pass the law in these states, and maybe they wouldn't be challenged, or they would just be on the books. It'd be one of those laws that don't get enforced. But who knows? Who knows where we'll be in a year from now in that regard? But
they probably know they don't need to, because the economic barriers are so great already.
That's right. That's the whole point. And
now there will be the fucking revolution.
There you go. And then the revolution comes. Folks, speaking of which, you can become a member of the Majority Report at jointhemajorityreport.com. Every day, it's a little revolution.
Sam did vote for George Bush at least once.
Twice.
It's okay.
Twice. Yeah.
The first time he wanted to restore civility. The second time he was concerned about managing the invasion of Iraq.
I was actually a little bit more concerned about who I want to have a beer with. And George Bush just seemed like the type of guy I'd want to have a beer with.
Hate you, guy.
JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Pennies a day. And as a way of saying thank you, we give you bonus material. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, a lecturer from the University of York, Nisha Kapoor, on Deport, Deprive, Extradite, 21st Century State Extremism. We'll be right back.
Don't cry. You can rely on me, honey. You can combine anything you want. I'll be around. You were right about the start. setting sun. Tall buildings shake, voices escape, singing sad, sad songs. Tuned to chords strung down your cheeks, bitter melodies turning your orbit around. Don't cry.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program a lecturer from the University of York, Nisha Kapoor, author of Deport, Deprive, Extradite, 21st Century State Extremism. Welcome to the program, Nisha.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So let's start with, obviously you've written this book primarily about the experience of both immigrants and the war on terror in the context of Britain, at least primarily. Where do you see, before we get into sort of the details of your book, but where do you see the relationship between Britain and the United States policies in this regard?
Well, I mean, I guess the book is about the cases of a group of men who were extradited from Britain to the U.S. For terrorism-related offences, and although the book's focus, as you say, is mostly about Britain, there's a lot to be said for the way in which the U.S. and the UK work in collaboration with each other around counterterrorism policy and practice. And actually, Britain's been really instrumental kind of globally for helping develop countering counterterrorism, countering violent extremism policy that's been used elsewhere. And the U.S. has certainly borrowed from Britain in some of its approaches to dealing with terrorism in the U.S. context. So there's certainly a lot of collaboration in terms of political approaches, in terms of policy, and it works both ways. There's lots of policing expertise that's borrowed from the U.S. as well in counterterrorism, but in general policing context too.
So in terms of tactics, the countries share, I guess, tactics. But in terms of like a strategic framework, has the United States, in many respects, followed sort of a framework that has been sort of grown up through Great Britain?
Well, I mean, the way in which counterterrorism policy works is certainly global, and of course it's very much connected to the U.S. and Britain's foreign policy and imperialist interventions in various parts of, in other places across the world, and across the Muslim countries in particular. But I guess in terms of thinking about the framework, in terms of how counterterrorism is used domestically, then Britain's history in terms of dealing with Ireland, its history of having to of sort of developing a counterterrorism policy within its own borders, within its domestic sphere, has been sort of really important for its own way of trying to deal with terrorism at home, and therefore producing expertise that's kind of been used and borrowed to be applied in other domestic contexts in the West, basically. So it's that's simply that sometimes the way in which kind of military operations can be used freely in occupied spaces, in Iraq or Afghanistan or elsewhere, can't be used so openly in the sort of domestic context, and so alternative approaches are used, and that's why kind of Ireland and Britain have been quite important for the US in some senses for developing kind of counterterrorism. But equally, practices that have been used in Iraq and Afghanistan and so on, are also very important.
I want to talk about some of those alternative programs, but let's go back to and start with Windrush. Tell us, tell us, because I don't think most folks in our audience would know any of this history, for the most part. I don't want to, if people do, but I certainly wasn't aware of it.
So what? Just generally what it is?
Yeah. I mean, well, walk us through its history and what how it and why you included it in your explanation of what's going on here.
Okay, so I mean, I don't talk explicitly about Windrush in the book, but I did respond to the recent political debates and discussion that have been quite prolific in the British context around Windrush. And so I'll just explain for your listeners that recently it's come to light in Britain that a number of elders, people of the Windrush generation, people who migrated to Britain in the 1950s from the Caribbean, from Jamaica and elsewhere, are being deported because they have no official proof of nationality. And this is because when they were migrating to Britain, they were migrating to Britain as British subjects under, a legacy of kind of British Empire, and the formal ways in which, as British citizens, but the formal ways in which citizenship has, the policy documents that that kind of have come to be quite routine in terms of granting citizenship weren't in operation. So there's lots of people who migrated to Britain from the Caribbean, from parts of Africa, from South Asia during that period, who live in Britain and have citizenship, but who don't necessarily have the paper documentation to prove it, and haven't kind of followed up with getting
Hello?
Style immigration policies that are in place currently in the British context. It has meant that which require individuals to have proof of a British passport, of British citizenship to access, health and welfare services, but and also just, for sort of immigration purposes, have been threatened with or actually been deported on the back of the kind of more recent immigration policy. So there's been kind of a huge uproar against the treatment of this generation who are being deported wrongly, who are in fact British citizens. My sort of response to some of the ways in which this debate has played out is that sometimes the critique hasn't sufficiently addressed the ways in which individuals who are here, who are here as immigrants but don't necessarily have British citizenship, are being treated through the immigration system, so are being deported. But also the ways in which numerous numbers of Muslims who are British citizens are and have been stripped of their citizenship, or removed, or had their passports cancelled because they're being criminalised through terrorism legislation. We don't hear so much in the way of kind of a response, a critique about this, because there's a general kind of consensus of support for counter-terrorism policy. So it doesn't get the same kind of anti-racist response.
Right. Well, and the point is, and I think you make this point, I think, in your book, is that these things build on each other, and you build you expand society's willingness to accept one thing, and that becomes a building block to expand those policies. And so, I mean, and I think we're seeing this in this country as well, when you start with the undocumented immigrant, push, and then you expand that to people who are here under a program because they may be coming from a country that has suffered a natural disaster, and then that begins to expand to we're going to take in less asylum seekers, and then we're going to go back and review the documents of existing and so on and so on, and these things build on each other. Let's talk about the development of those of the deprivation of citizenship under the auspices of counterterrorism, and I guess these are sort of the canaries in the coal mine in a way.
Yeah, right. So much of the kind of recent uproar against the sort of deportation of citizens in this country is kind of misses the point that since 2002 we've had a massive intensification in Britain of powers of legislation that allows for individuals to be deprived of their citizenship, and this has occurred and this has been legitimated through counterterrorism policy, right? Through legislation that has specifically targeting individuals who are being accused of, or who are identified as terrorism suspects. And because it's been passed through a sort of a counterterrorism narrative, it's largely gone, it's not just gone unchallenged, but there's been a sort of a popular support in certain quarters for it. So we had an Islamic preacher called known as Abu Hamza al-Masri, who in 2002 was identified by the press, by the media in this country as being kind of one of the extremist preachers resident in Britain, kind of this domestic Osama bin Laden, who should be deported, who was counter to kind of British values and British ideas and the things that he was preaching, and was hugely problematic as a figure. And the Home Secretary in this country receives a raft of letters from the British public demanding that he be deported, but because he was a British citizen, he couldn't be deported. And so on the back of this, the Home Secretary says, something else needs to be done, and legislation is passed which lowers the threshold, which eases the ability for the Home Secretary to deprive an individual of their citizenship. And then in 2006, the legislation is enhanced again so that you can be deprived of your citizenship if the Home Secretary decides it's conducive to the public good to do so. And in 2014, on the back of another terrorism case, the British government passes some immigration legislation which says that individuals can be deprived of their citizenship even if they don't have citizenship elsewhere. So can be effectively made stateless if the Home Secretary believes that they can acquire it elsewhere. So another case that I talk about, Min Pham, who's extradited to the US in 2015, is extradited and deprived of his citizenship at the same time, and he doesn't have any other citizenship. Vietnam, where he left when he was 1 month old, doesn't recognize him as a citizen. And so through this kind of counterterrorism legislation, through this sort of counterterrorism policy and assault, we've one of the things that's happened is this massive growth of powers, massive enhancement of kind of state powers to be able to deprive individuals of their citizenship. And these are measures that Britain led the way on globally, but there are parallels that have been sort of used or discussed in Australia and Canada and in other parts of Europe and elsewhere. So because these aren't empathetic figures, they haven't really attracted any kind of not very much contestation.
So, all right. So I want to go backwards here a little bit so that people really understand, what is problematic about this, because you create these. It's almost like you're creating, I don't know, there's all sorts of different metaphors I think people could use, but you're creating almost like these new neural pathways for the way of depriving people of their citizenship, of the way of deporting people. And you're doing it for people who, from the perspective of the easiest sell. But once they're created, they exist, and they can. And then the question is, who all of a sudden, not whether or not we have the power to do this, but who are we going to do it to? And that's the dynamic that we're seeing here. So I mean, just walk us through. You say, like, and I want, just so that people understand, the Home Secretary is I don't know if we have necessarily an equivalent in this country who would have that kind of authority, but nevertheless, I guess maybe the DOJ, maybe the Attorney General would have something similar to this. But,
yeah.
But just take us from where what was the baseline? Like, was there even a concept of being able to deny an individual their citizenship, unless there was some type of problem with the way that they became a citizen? I mean, did that exist prior to this? And then we see the myriad of ways it becomes chipped away.
Yeah, so there is some powers on the books, but they're very weak, and they haven't been. They were used, I think, literally very rarely, hardly at all, even since before the Second World War. So, I mean, there is some ability to do this, but they're very limited in power, and it has seldomly been used. And it's even after the power is passed, in this country in 2002, it's only used against Abu Hamza, and it becomes informally known as the Hamza Amendment because it's in his name that it's passed. It's informally known in that way by lawyers who are aware of it. But it's only really after 2010 that it comes to be used a bit more frequently, and it's always been used against Muslims. And again, these aren't kind of large. These aren't the numbers. It's still only a small number of cases relative to the number of people, for example, who are being deported. But the point is, as you say, that the powers are there, and that it's actually gone hand in hand with a bigger discourse, a bigger idea that citizenship is a privilege, not a right. So this has become very normal. Right? This has become normalized to kind of think about citizenship in this way. So the things that are happening against these men who are at the sort of extreme end of state brutality, of state disciplinary powers, aren't things that are going to happen to everybody. But the point is, it alters the. First of all, we have to talk about the injustice against these specific cases in and of themselves, right, for themselves. I think that's important to say. But also that it has a kind of broader impact in that it changes the very nature of how we come to think about social justice, how democracy comes to be practiced, and how our kind of the various sort of state functions operate too. So, yeah, I mean, partly it's to talk about the sort of what happens to these particular people, but also to think about what the consequences are for the way in which society is structured, the way in which the state is kind of operating, and the greater powers, the authoritarian nature of what's happening. So the greater kind of powers are being awarded to the state through this process.
And I should say that in the United States, because we have a constitution, essentially, I think, and because our citizenship is defined within the context of the Constitution, if you're a natural-born citizen of the United States, you cannot have it revoked by anybody but yourself, really. But the dynamic is the same, right? I mean, that is the point that you're making here, is that we can. There is I guess this is, they say, a slippery slope, but and I guess you could also say, the frog boiling in the water and not quite aware. What is are there different sort of like facets to this in terms of the psychology of those in government and the psychology of those outside of it? I mean, I keep drawing parallels here to the United States, but we had a program under the Obama administration of detaining families at the border as a deterrent to, for people to come up here and to seek asylum. And it seems to me that both our lack of concern as a society was problematic about that measure, and what it taught, like literally the people working in these agencies, as to what were the bounds in which was appropriate, was okay. And I want, talk about that in the context of what we've seen in terms of counterterrorism.
Yeah. So we have something very, we have detention centers that are used to lock up asylum seekers, who are in the process of claiming asylum, and same detention centers are being used for those citizens like the Windrush generation who are being, who are now sort of being deported, or who can't prove their sort of residency, or can't prove their legal status, and very much this isn't, I guess when we're talking about kind of the state, to some extent, there's the sort of element of power that's operating at the level of legislation and policy, but it's absolutely dependent on regular folks, people who are working in the various different institutions. Some of these are private sector institutions, border agency staff, and so on. But very much also individuals working in health. What's happening here, and I imagine it's something similar in the U.S., is that immigration control is being, or immigration policing is being kind of broadened, and responsibility is being placed on landlords, on doctors, on nurses, on teachers, on higher education staff, on lecturers, on academics, on people who work in various different public institutions, to monitor people's immigration status, for whom they are delivering a service, or for whom they are working with, and and there's consequences for not adhering to Home Office policy, so the policies of the equivalent, say, of the Department of Justice for ensuring that these that immigration law is being implemented correctly. So and that's very much the case with the way in which counterterrorism policy is operating, right? So when you asked me at the beginning about some of the frameworks, obviously one of the biggest is PREVENT, and that's something that's been developed in the British context, which has been kind of rolled out in various ways elsewhere. And so this is very much about kind of racial profiling, policing based on suspicion. It has residences with COINTELPRO. It's about kind of trying to identify any kind of behaviors, or practices or changes in, political views, for example, of Muslims, and sort of documenting those and assessing those, and sort of monitoring those to see, in order to kind of make interventions lest they lead to radicalization. And this is a policy that has, the education sector, teachers are being expected to sort of enforce, but that social workers, doctors, mental health professionals, individuals who are charged, or who we think of as being kind of caring, or as doing as kind of playing a sort of welfare or supportive or educative role ordinarily in our children and young people's lives, are actually being tasked with doing kind of policing, which is one of the ways in which counterterrorism policy is operating so effectively in spaces where it's not being done by, say, the military all the time. It's kind of being done through our education institutions.
I mean, these are like, counter-revolutionary committees, the equivalent of, right? Like these sort of like internal, everyone is becoming weaponized in some fashion. I mean, so that there's really two tracks, right? It's expansion of what the state can do to its citizens, and then its expansion as to what the apparatus to do those things is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And where, I mean, do you have a sense of, and maybe it's more generic than this, but do you have a sense of there being a how you measure, I guess the taxonomy of this? I mean, if counterterrorism, if terrorism suspects and what the government can do to them is sort of the canary in the coal mine, like what, and then immigrants become, I don't know, the cat in the coal mine. What's the next? I mean, where does it usually go? Is there, is it just a question of the most vulnerable who happen to be in that, in society, or is there in your sense, a sort of almost a timeless notion of who the next sort of group of people are?
I mean, I think this is why it's so important to sort of think and speak and be aware of what racism is, right? And how race is so important for understanding how these different kind of disciplinary and policing practices work. Because it's what happens to, what happens to sort of the who the sort of most marginalized or outcast or targeted are, who is racially kind of demonized or marginalized, is something that changes in different social contexts. It's something that changes over history. Obviously, there are some forms of racialization which persist much, are much more kind of ingrained or sort of held over huge long periods of history and over time. You can think about the sort of experiences of African Americans in the U.S. context. But I think what's important to recognize is that what happens to the sort of most demonized or outcast is not ever going to be, the way in which power works is that it's never going to be kind of universally implemented. So there may well be other marginal groups that are next, the working, so the broader sort of working class. So often what happens, or what gets experimented on in sort of asylum policy, it gets then infiltrated into the general welfare state, right? So whether that's about kind of vouchers, whether that's about, in Britain, they started dispersing asylum seekers around the country so they weren't all congregating in London, and then you see housing policy in Britain in the broader sort of welfare social services sector following the same kind of trend. And similarly with sort of credit vouchers and food stamps, things like that are first of in the British context first of all experimented with in terms of how asylum seekers are dealt with, and then these things get rolled out. So there definitely is a kind of a ways in which these things become kind of normalized or extended. But the point is, I think, that we need to sort of say, well, actually these are huge. What's happening here is a huge issue around sort of social injustice. So, and if we want to be, advocating for a more egalitarian, more equal, more just society, then we need to be lobbying against what's happening to these people just because it's happening to these people, right? So, but that's and criminalization is so important as well in terms of sort of thinking about there is such a requirement for sort of critical response to the ways in which individuals are criminalized through counterterrorism policy, through immigration policy. And I think certainly with the former, there has just been so much, such a lack of kind of public discussion and engagement. So because there's always a sense that, if they're being accused of such and such a crime, then it's, obviously there needs to be some kind of repercussion or some kind of response, and the debate often stops there.
Is there? I mean, is there a danger in just looking at the sort of the I guess the systemic implications of this? I mean, because it occurs to me, and obviously I'm using the States as an example because I'm more intimately aware of it, but. Today we're detaining and essentially kidnapping the children of people who are seeking asylum in the States. And tomorrow it could be people who we decide to put through denaturalization process. Oh, okay. Everybody who we have 2,000 people that we have found who filled out their forms incorrectly 5 or 6 years ago or 10 years ago. We're going to put them through a process, and we're going to separate. We're going to take their children and put them into the system. And at what point, the idea that this is a system that's being built and it's going to begin to snare ever more people, it cuts both ways. Because if you are a member of society where you're like, well, I know it's never going to happen to me, maybe it's not, maybe that's not the only reason to be concerned about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have to. I guess we have to. It's important. We have to encourage some public debates and understanding and just knowledge and information over what's kind of presented in the majority of the sort of mainstream media about these issues, and then the actual realities for the individuals who are being criminalized or who are being targeted through these measures, to kind of put to get sort of alternative narratives out there over what the implications are and kind of what this is really about. So so if we think about sort of the discourses or the ideas around sort of terrorism, one of the things I'm obviously playing with in the book is that actually is not to deny the very real issues around sort of political violence, but it is to say that most people who have been criminalized, most Muslims who have been criminalized as through counterterrorism legislation or who are being identified in databases as terrorism suspects, are being, there's no evidence against any of these individuals. They are being preemptively policed, they are being profiled, and there are significant consequences for individuals wrapped up in this. At the most extreme end, it has meant that there have been people extradited to Britain or have been to the US without any kind of real due process, who are being detained in solitary confinement for 3 years pre-trial and then they typically enter a plea bargain, or who are denied any kind of sense of due process, who are being stripped of their citizenship and then killed by drones, or who are being denied all kinds of things that we would normally or ordinarily consider as sort of as automatic human rights. So there's a kind of whole alternative narrative to be told around these individuals who've been criminalized. In order to sort of help us reframe stories about kind of what's actually happening here. Why is there a need to kind of keep enhancing these sort of disciplinary techniques? What are they doing? Whose interests are they actually working in? And why? And what are the consequences of that?
Nisha Kapoor, the book is Deport, Deprive, Extradite, 21st Century State Extremism. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. Going to take a quick break and then head into the fun half of the program. We have a lot of sound. We have a lot of things, obviously, to discuss as Donald Trump starts to wind up. He's announced July 9th will supposedly be the day he announces who his Supreme Court pick will be. And really, I mean, all eyes have been focusing on Susan Collins to see if she will, in any respect, stand up for a woman's right to choose, like she's been pretending she would do for the totality of her Senate career. This is probably the first time that she will actually have to the first time that she will, where there will be consequences for her vote. Dramatic consequences. I mean, obviously, as she justified voting for Neil Gorsuch, this is going to be one where I think she won't be able to get away with it.
Tune in, folks.
Exactly. We'll see. Just a couple other quick notes before we head into the fun half. Finally, folks, after 30 years of being deprived the opportunity to kill red wolves in North Carolina, the Interior Department just last week announced a plan that would allow private landowners to kill wolves that stray onto their property from a protected federal wildlife refuge. If you are living in a protected federal wildlife refuge as a, let's say, a red wolf, and you just don't know where you're just walking around and you happen to stumble on somebody else's property, you must have the personal responsibility to realize that you can't get away with that.
It's a national security issue.
It's a national security issue. My understanding is that there are only 35 of these red wolves left.
Probably 34 now.
Right.
Trump Jr. is going to definitely bag one of those, I think.
Yes. The service's new objective, said Leopoldo Miranda, Assistant Director for Ecological Services in the agency's Southeast region, would be to intensively manage a smaller population of 10 to 15 red wolves at the refuge to preserve their genetic value and wild behaviors in the hopes that officials can find a location more friendly and suitable than eastern North Carolina. So they will be removed. Thank God.
Sleep easier.
It's, I mean, it's just shocking.
They just want to be able to give more individualized attention to each wolf, okay?
That's right. And you can't, with 35 running around, it's like herding cats, never mind wolves.
Some SJW wolves over there.
Quality over quantity.
Want to make it all about how they're red wolves.
One bit of good news. The U.S. ambassador to Estonia resigned. And he was a career diplomat named James D. Melville. He served as a diplomat for 33 years, has been ambassador to Estonia since 2015, was due to retire soon anyways, but said in a private Facebook post announcing his retirement that Trump's behavior and comments accelerated his decision. So, I mean, we need more people of conscience to quit this administration. I mean, I think the idea now of like people staying on, and I would say like in some agencies there might be some value, because if you can slow the roll of these psychos, then by all means do it. But for ambassadors, for people of any sort of like high profile, this is good. I hope there's a lot more that leave.
I know at least 4 people who do human trafficking networks who will take that job to Estonia in a heartbeat. Means nothing. Owning the libs.
Do you really even think like he could
think that quickly of what Estonia is?
Estonia?
No.
What?
But I'm sure that somewhere it's
Estonia, Estonia.
But it's connected with human trafficking in his mind.
I'm sure.
Is that one of those places that isn't paying enough for NATO?
Yeah. Is that one of those? No, it's like, are they not paying enough for NATO, or was it an Epstein party? I don't know. Or both.
Can't remember.
Can't remember.
Folks, before we go, and you may want to stick around for this because we have a special version of La Poupée today. It involves La Poupée will play underneath a Facebook Live video. And someone cut this up, right?
Yeah, this is a Ken Jack.
Ken Jack on
it's from Barstool
on Twitter.
Sports.
From Barstool Sports, cut up a Mark Zuckerberg live stream from his backyard talking about barbecue, and this thing is pretty insane.
It's really really uneasy.
Just a reminder, your membership makes this show possible. Become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. If you cannot afford a membership, and however, you do want the extra content, by all means, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Wait an intolerable amount of time for us to get to the email, and we will hook you up. I apologize for those waiting for email responses. We will get there, I promise. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. They have I think they still have that cold brew. I'm going to try that. It's all cold brew now, and they have a special like coffee that is amenable to being brewed coldly. I know you can buy a little cold brew thing, but you need coffee for it, don't you? I don't know if you can buy that at Just Coffee. Brendan's very excited.
No, you don't.
Brendan has his own little cold brew device. I think we got one here too. I think I brought, but I think it's 1 cup at a time. Also, today is Monday, which means that tomorrow, July 3rd, is Tuesday. That is 4th of July Eve, as we call it around here. And is there going to be a special TMBS for 4th of July?
Well, the special was Sunday, the illicit history for patrons on Thomas Paine, the leftist founding father. But tomorrow, the show...
You're just going to ignore the birthday of this country, the independence.
It'll be in there. It'll be in there. It'll be noted. It almost doesn't need to be said. Chris Morano, who's a labor reporter for the Jacobin. We're going to talk about Janus and the future of labor organizing. And then Bree Joy, who's a crew, obviously, and also politics editor Intercept, is going to come in. We'll talk about electoral stuff. And then Jake Flores is going to join us for even more fun.
There you go. That guy cracks me up.
He's a funny dude.
And Jamie, I know I can only imagine what you have planned for the July 4th version of the Antifada.
I mean, yeah, we've got a special flag burning episode planned just for the birthday of our country.
The audio of it?
Yeah, we might also burn a copy of the Constitution.
It's great for ASMR.
Yeah, get those crackles right up in your ears.
It's definitely a time where you want to definitely get rid of...
My daughter checked that stuff out. And I'm like, what are you doing?
No, but
What
seriously.
did she check out? What is it?
It's stuff like where you listen to someone who just like needs to take a sip of water or needs to take a sip of water and they just keep going.
That's so bizarre.
It is.
You know what it is?
So annoying.
It's intimacy that you couldn't normally feel except for the technology we have here. Someone like can whisper in your ear, but they're not actually there. You can just experience the sensation.
I'm sorry. The whole thing where like people are licking their lips over and over again.
Unless it was remember the Rubio mashup we had?
Right.
That was actually
right.
Free.
It was
that was maybe my version.
The
I
idea
liked.
that people would listen to that for pleasure is very odd to me.
Rubio was. Oh, sorry.
Be nice. Matt is about to announce his brand new ASMR Twitch project.
Is that right?
He wishes.
It's coming.
No, but seriously, we
play Fortnite and then just spend the whole time going. All right, go ahead.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I forgot what we even talked about this week now after all this whisper talk. No, we had on Aaron Petkoff of the ISO and the New Yorker Union, brand new exciting project in the world. And we talked a little bit about Ocasio-Cortez. Sean went off pretty hard on people who don't understand how systemic change happens. It's great. Check it out. It's coming out on Wednesday, by the way.
And Matt, Literary Hangover?
There was a special 20-minute episode for premium patron subscribers.
Wow.
Where we talked
Getting very
about
fancy.
Catherine Maria Sedgwick, author of Hope Leslie. She's one of the authors that we're going to sort of reanimate, I guess. Maybe that's not the right word. But
I think that's a very interesting word choice for a audio product.
Yeah,
like
but But and we also get into some metrics.
She's getting really big now.
If you want to know what our downloads are like, become a member on Patreon, and I just say it on the air. So
wow,
that's interesting.
Yep.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break. Head into the fun half. The number is 646-257-3920 if you want to be a part of this program. 646-257-3920. You can IM us through the app. I believe we are very close for the Android app to be back up, at least in partial functioning. We're having high-level conversations with Google right now.
Michael's been screaming at Eric Schmidt in the streets.
Like, you idiot. Oh, I did him. I can't believe, I regret not doing that. I was too shell-shocked to do anything.
And now
I saw. I told you that story, right? I saw Eric Schmidt I was meeting somebody like in Flatiron.
What? Seriously?
It was nothing. I was meeting somebody for dinner in Flatiron, like literally a week after the election, and all that went through my mind was that we had done a show in the primary about how Google people involved with Google were manipulating
analytics.
Yeah, it was this whole convoluted like best minds in the world are manipulating the data for Hillary, and I was just like, you fucking idiots got beat by Breitbart. Like, what is the matter with you? Moron.
It's supposed to be in hand, you nerd.
Yeah, I know. It's like, look, like you were saying, but for once, after destroying like the modern economy, you had one job to manipulate the general election for Hillary Clinton, and you couldn't do it. And now you're like walking around like a doofus, being like, hey, I got a Burning Man.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. I guess that was, we're still working on that app. So majorityapp.com.
Hey, everyone. We are live from my backyard where I am smoking a brisket and some ribs. I'm making meats now. Smoking these meats here. Our little meat smoking. It's smoking. So I'm the meat chef. Yeah, someone asked me, do I smoke meat? Smoking meat. Smoking these meats. Smoking meats earlier in the day. Smoking these meats, just set the charcoal up, and you set the wood chips up, and then smoking meats, grilling meats, good smoky flavor. Smoke a brisket for like 12 hours. You smoke lemon chicken, smoke salmon, you'll love it. Bison sirloin, ribs and sausage, so I'm looking forward to that. Today we got a brisket on the big guy, and some pork ribs on the green egg. Meat like a brisket. I got ribs in there. Finishing off the brisket and the ribs, and I'm just sitting in our backyard, finishing off this brisket and these ribs. But hopefully for Canadian Thanksgiving, you get to eat a lot of brisket and ribs. How many of you guys are eating brisket and ribs tonight? Brisket and ribs. They taste doubly better when you hunted the animal yourself. So what are you guys making for dinner? Brisket and ribs, I hope. Delicious. Brisket and ribs. The ribs and the brisket need to be eaten. I want to try your brisket. I want to try my brisket. It's a pretty tough cut of meat. The ribs and the brisket. Are you excited to have a rib tonight? I want my baby back ribs. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce. That is going on the ribs. Sweet Baby Ray's and the Sweet Baby Ray's. Sweet Baby Ray's is very good. Sweet Baby Ray's. Sweet Baby Ray's. We have just applied the Sweet Baby Ray's. Sweet Baby Ray's. Sweet Baby Ray's. Throw some Sweet Baby Ray's on the ribs. Take it from there. She's waiting for her ribs. I mean, she knows what's coming, and Sweet Baby Ray's. So that's pretty good. Who doesn't like ribs? Everyone likes ribs. Everyone likes ribs.
Excuse me.
Yeah, no, this is what Facebook Live is for. Just
We are back. It's the fun half. That was a great
Live is
video.
for.
What's that? It's what
Facebook.
That's what fun half is for, folks.
That's what the fun half is for.
Wow.
Being obnoxious.
We were hanging out on the internet over the weekend, and Sean's like,
We do.
Why did Matt
Rips?
Leck post a video of Mark Zuckerberg? And then I watched it and we were like, oh.
I'm a big fan of his cookouts.
He's got great. You know what sort of strikes me about that is like what the dude. He's got those like fold out chairs. Do you know what he like? See those chairs they're sitting in, like those ones that you like bring to like a tailgating party. Doesn't
like,
he? He doesn't have any real.
Like, of course he would. That is so tech billionaire.
Let's go to the part of the.
It's just like
the backyard that doesn't look like it's worth
right.
$1 billion.
Right. And I'm functional and I'm non-pretentious. Like it's total like when those guys had more like brand currency, they always would put stuff like that in their articles. It would in their profiles. It would be like, yeah, like they own like 3 yachts and a jet. But for purposes of this article,
I got my smoker.
No, it's literally,
you know those green.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the big black smoker goes for, but those green eggs.
Yeah,
I mean,
expensive.
I've had someone cook me a steak on that, and it was amazing. But they're super expensive.
I'm so jealous. I want one so bad to smoke all my soy proteins in.
Gabe from Chicago on the IM Socialism Conference 2018 in Chicago this weekend of July 5th through 8. Not sold out yet. What would it take to convince MR Crew to take a field trip, get all that sweet swag, and seize the means of production in our muggy Chicago weather? I will tell you simply that request. Based on that, Jamie is headed out there to go to the conference and will be calling in on Thursday at the end of the show on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
And maybe on Friday as well. Just to give us an update of what's going on there, maybe do some recordings, obviously, for this show and for the Antifada. So all you needed to do was ask.
Yeah, good idea, man.
Bull Prague. There's a new right-to-work bill making its way through Congress to increase jobs in the face of SJW's identity politics called the Productivity Over Oppressive People Act, or the POOP Act. Are you serious?
I don't think so.
Democratic, submissive. I would double my subscription fee if Sam read actuarial reports of the Social Security Trust Fund in an ASMR voice. I would put that out as
revenue streams.
That is so
that would be an interesting like side gig.
You'd have some takers.
Sean, Rosetta Stone has developed a limited edition Donald Trump package for the hardest languages: English, Scottish, Irish, Canadian, Pig Latin. Nick the Liberal, your transactionalism and suggested by
transactionalism, is that what he's trying to say?
There's an M. Transactionalism. And that suggested by Henry Giroux is generally correct. But sometimes the Dems offer you a choice between Pol Pot and Idi Amin, especially in South Jersey. That's why I supported NJEA's effort to defeat Senator President Sweeney. The near shutdown was payback, and Sweeney admitted on TV that he would not have even spoken with Murphy on Saturday if the Assembly Speaker had not applied pressure. Yes, I mean, pressure is good. Ryan Chat, A. Bob Olitrol, happy pre-Democrat uprising day. Sam, one thing I want to bring up is the nightmare of a post-Trump presidency, provided Mueller or Big Macs don't silence him. He already breaks with precedent. So what stops from Twitter rants as a former president? It's a tradition of former presidents to keep silent. Well, the thing is, I don't think people are going to listen to him anymore after he becomes president. And then I would love it if he got banned from Twitter.
That would be really funny. That would be quite a double. Like the day he loses re-election, he gets banned from Twitter. It's just like, this is the worst day ever. Totally unfair. No one ever asked Sean Hannity about it. Oh, no, I mean, I'm totally just painting a fantasy for you guys. I mean, he's definitely going to get reelected.
Calling from a 512 area code. Who's this?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah?
This is Palmer from Texas.
Hello, Palmer. What's on your mind?
I just got a story that took place down here in Williamson County last Tuesday that I thought you guys should be aware of.
Okay.
Our county commissioners took a vote and in a 4-1 decision decided to completely end all intergovernmental cooperation with ICE as well as terminate the contract for the detention facility here in Taylor owned by CoreCivic.
Wow. Wow. What is, I mean, tell me a little bit more about Taylor, because that does not sound like, tell me, how close is it to the border? I presume it's right on the border, yes?
No. Williamson County is directly north of Travis County, which is Austin. However, the thing that makes it so surprising is Williamson County for years has been, it's had somewhat of a reputation for being a law and order county, somewhat notorious even within this state, and a lot of that had to do with starting off in like the late 60s into the 70s. The population here in Williamson has always been somewhat older, although a lot of that's changed in the past 20 years, and basically it was a lot of the law enforcement efforts essentially were centered around like sending a message to all of the people coming out of UT who would come down here.
Uh-huh. And so what's the impact of that vote? Will they be able to shut down that did you say it was CoreCivic? It was a CoreCivic detention center, yes?
Yes.
So do they have the authority to shut it down, or do the feds come in, or does the state say we're overruling home rule, or what happens next?
That I do not know about, because I imagine for a lot of people here, just like myself, that vote caught everyone off guard. I mean, it got picked up on Tuesday night on the local news coming out of Austin, and then Wednesday morning I saw an article about it in The Hill, but of course by that afternoon everything had been overshadowed by Kennedy.
Right. Interesting. I'll look into it. I appreciate the call.
All right, sure thing. Y'all have a good one.
Thanks. Brendan, would you make a note of that, please? It's interesting because, we would be led to believe that that type of, that anti-American sentiment involving shutting down the child detention centers all right, let's just listen to Susan Collins, because we have to. Here is Susan Collins. Now here's the thing. If you talk to, and surely Susan Collins has access to these people. If you talk to anyone who is a student of the Supreme Court, who is a student of right-wing legal thought, what's coming out of the Federalist Society, that guy, I want to say Leo Laporte, but I don't think it's Leo Laporte. Trump's chief advisor on who to pick, Leo Lapointe or something to that effect. Federalist Society guy. What is it? What is it? Leonard Leo, exactly. Sorry. Leo Laporte is a famous tech blogger.
I was going to say, okay. Leo Laporte. He's got great tickets. He's coming over. We're going to do the Supreme Court. It's going to become
Leonard
technology.
Leo.
That would be if Trump was a Democrat.
Leonard Leo is already saying, like, we're not looking for someone who's going to overturn Roe v. Wade, which is a strong indication that they're looking for someone who is going to do stuff like trap laws, and who is willing to erode and perceive the rights under Roe v. Wade, under our Constitution, for a woman to get an abortion to be not particularly sacrosanct. And so we'll chip away at it. And so this is the game that Susan Collins is going to play here. And this is the failure of the media to really address it. Because really the issue isn't, is there someone who is going to overturn, would you support someone who's going to overturn Roe v. Wade? And she, of course, says no. But the real question is, are you going to support someone who supports abortion rights? That's really the question that needs to be addressed. And the whole Roe v. Wade thing is a way of sidestepping that specific question.
Of the court, that really could happen this time, especially for the future of cases like Roe v. Wade. You talked about precedent. You support abortion rights. What will you do to ensure that remains in place with the nominee?
I'm going to have an in-depth discussion with the nominee, and I believe very much that Roe v. Wade is settled law as it has been described by Chief Justice Roberts. It has been established as a constitutional right for 45 years and was reaffirmed 26 years ago. So a nominee's position on whether or not they respect precedent will tell me a lot about whether or not they would overturn Roe v. Wade. A candidate for this important position who would overturn Roe v. Wade would not be acceptable to me, because that would indicate an activist agenda that I don't want to see a judge have. And that would indicate to me a failure to respect precedent, a fundamental tenet of our judicial system.
High on the hill was a lonely goat herd,
Now a bunch of excited Democrats will go on Twitter and think that I'll save them. But then I'll meet with Mr. Trump's pick and he'll say, I'll be mindful of precedent. And presto bingo, I'm going to vote to confirm this man.
Right. I mean, that's basically
it. Get ready for another Lucy with the football.
It's all, well, here's the thing. It's all... everything she is doing there is creating the essentially the straw man and the false premise upon which her litmus test will be drawn. It is everything she said there was irrelevant to the question of whether or not abortion rights will be preserved, and there you go. I mean, she's going to try and get away with it, and she's going to get away with it. And people, the only thing I can tell you is that if you live in Maine in particular, I would spend a lot of time at her office telling her that it's not enough. Protecting precedents is not enough. We need to protect the actual rights. Stop hiding behind weasel words.
Yeah, I mean, judges have to pretend to be neutral on political questions like this, but senators and House reps do not. So maybe they should predicate their support for it on the actual principle at hand.
Well, she's won like multiple awards, right, for protecting abortion rights, and now is really the one time where she's got to do that.
I have a new announcement if you'd like to hear it, you boy.
Sure.
Maybe we'll do this after the other part where you encourage my constituents to call me is clipped. But that being said, there used to be a character on this program called Woke Susan Collins, and there's a new one called Psych Susan Collins, where I get all of the people to get all excited that I might stop some travesty that Mr. Trump is doing, and everybody writes some columns about me, about how I'm causing them such a headache and such an independently minded, integrity-filled person, and then boom, psych. Like Lucy with the football, you get screwed. I'm not looking for an abortion. I'm looking for a lobbying gig and to not get killed by somebody that reads Breitbart. Peace out. Go fuck yourselves. I'm voting to confirm.
Speaking of not getting killed, I mean, this weekend there was a lot of protests around the country. How many cities was it? It was like 700?
Brendan's saying 700.
700 protests around the country. To keep families together. In New York, we had one that went from Foley Square in Manhattan, ostensibly trying to cross the Brooklyn Bridge into Cadman Square. I was down in Cadman Square, and something like 10,000 people were log jammed at the bridge. And so a ton of people never made it over. because I guess they wouldn't close down parts of the bridge, or they just had one walkway, and it just was not enough. But easily there was 5,000 or 6,000 people, I think, at Cadman, while they were still waiting on 10,000 across the bridge. So a lot of people. In Washington, I believe, in Los Angeles, Maxine Waters, who of course is both outspoken, a woman, and African American. And so, of course, the way our body politic responds to the idea of a woman who is speaking out and also happens to be African American is uniquely American. And that is, she gets death threats. Here is her responding to this.
We're gonna win again! Donald Trump, we are sick and tired of you. We have no fear. You will not intimidate us. We're coming right at you, and we're saying to you, that the Constitution of the United States of America gives us the right to protest, and protest we will. We're saying to you, Donald Trump, you may not understand the Constitution of the United States. You may not have respect for the Constitution of the United States, but we're going to teach you a lesson. And the lesson that we're going to teach you is this. We understand the Constitution because we fought for it. We respect the Constitution because it is what has held us in good stead despite the people who act like you. And so because we know the Constitution, we understand the Constitution, we understand First Amendment rights, we're going to be in these streets until the children are reconnected with their parents. Now, we have some members of Congress who are intimidated. I have no fear. I'm in this fight. And I know that there are those who are talking about censoring me, talking about kicking me out of Congress, talking about shooting me, talking about hanging me. All I have to say is this. If you shoot me, you better shoot straight. There's nothing like a wounded animal.
There you go.
That's She's great. So cool.
Yep.
I mean, it's really interesting to me. Like, first of all, yeah, she's great and all solidarity with her. But it's some of this stuff. Because I remember, like, a year ago, a lot of people on the more, the socialist side, my side, were like had a lot of issues with her because she's like was talking about Russia a lot and this sort of thing. And I never cared either way, because to me it was just like it's an attitude. It's a certain aggressiveness and willing to put yourself on the line, regardless of where you fall in that distinction right now. I mean, she's a progressive liberal. That's great. It's her attitude and how she's willing to put herself out there that counts most in this particular context. Also, I thought the way she just totally physically brutalized Michael Tracy was pretty impressive. The way she just like dunked him and he was like a curled ball on the ground.
Went beast mode on him.
She went beast mode on Michael Tracy.
Well, people can be aggressive about the wrong things, certainly, but the things I've seen her being aggressive about lately are all good.
One of the things that I have to say that sort of frustrated me, at least with some of the speakers I heard while I was at Cadman, and just sort of broadly about how this is being framed, is this notion that they're talking about reuniting children with their parents, or this policy of family separation has to end. Understand, what we have done as a country is not family separation. Because when I say to you family separation, that could mean like, oh, we're taking your father away from from his wife and the kids, because men can't be housed in the same detention center as women and children. Or family separation. Hey, there's a divorce, and the father is going with one child and the mother is going with another child. What we have done is kidnapping. It's kidnapping. There should be no debate about the policy of family separation. We are kidnapping. If a mother and a child walk onto my front lawn and they're trespassing on my front lawn, I can't say, hey, wait a second, walk out, hold the gun at the mother and say, I'm taking your kid. It's kidnapping. And to say to the mother then, if you sign this document relinquishing your rights, statutory rights, under U.S. law and international law to seek asylum from this country, we'll give you your kid back. If you pay the fees to fly them, we'll give you your kid back. That's called ransom. We have kidnapped children as a policy, and then we've disappeared them. They're just lost in the system because there was never any plan. Nobody cared. This is not a policy. This is kidnapping. It's kidnapping. It's despicable. And frankly, like, the media reports it as this is a policy of family separation, right? That's the words that the Trump administration is saying to the reporters. What's going on here? Why are all these kids here? They've been taken from their mom. They've been told that the kid's going to take a bath and then they're just gone. Oh, that's our new policy of family separation. Yeah, the Trump administration doesn't get to define kidnapping as family separation. And I can understand why reporters will parrot those words. That's what they're told. They don't perceive their job as to reinterpret. But there really isn't a lot of reinterpretation that needs to go on. This is kidnapping. It's kidnapping. And at the very least, I think it's important that when you start talking about it with other people, you've got to remind them it's kidnapping. This is not family separation. Can mean a whole raft of other things. Kidnapping means one thing: you take the kids, and then you don't give them back unless you get ransom. Here is a 12-year-old girl. She was at the Washington, D.C. protest. Her name is Leah. She delivers a speech about the possibility of her mother being deported. And again, this is not a situation where kids show up and are kidnapped from their parents and their parents are put into some type of holding cell and are basically, you want your kid back? Sign this document, say you give up your asylum claim. It's not that. It's still a horrific policy of, for whatever reason, we feel it's necessary. And don't talk to me about rule of law unless you are calling for Jared Kushner to be indicted for his failure to report on every single federal document the guy's filled out. All felonies, not misdemeanors, felonies. And of course we could go on, right? But here is this 12-year-old girl talking about the fear of losing her mother.
I live with the constant fear of losing my mom to deportation. My mom is strong, beautiful, and brave. She is also a person who taught me how to speak up when I see things that aren't fair. mothers who just want a better life for their children.
I mean, the idea to put a 12-year-old kid through this, it's torture. And for what? For what possible reason? For what possible gain as a country
whiter
do we
country.
see? Yeah, I mean, that's
That's
it.
the only purpose.
Whipping up the base in a racist frenzy.
There you go.
And literally, I think, the demographics that favor you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the way it just starts. You'd start to just need to synchronize voter suppression.
It's obvious.
These immigration policies. It's obvious. It's just you're making your map.
And
they're not the only ones who aren't worried about those demographic
Here's
arguments.
the thing. The irony is that there's certainly, I mean, prior to this, there was certainly and I certainly am not the only person who thinks this, a significant reason to believe that a lot of these immigrants, particularly from Latin America, would become Republican voters. I mean, and I can tell you,
It was the Bush era thinking.
Well, I think they were right.
Those numbers have gone down every single election since 2000 for pretty obvious reasons.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that ship may have sailed. And the reason why they couldn't dock that ship, essentially, is because the base of the Republican Party just is racist.
We know who else
And
Bush
so
won
they-
a majority of in 2000, right?
In
2000,
Muslims.
yes,
Muslims.
exactly.
And the base of the Republican Party is simply too racist to motivate themselves to go and vote without this type of rhetoric. And this is the problem that the Republicans have. I mean, the funny thing is that I don't know what context I was talking to somebody about this, but somebody, they said they heard on WNYC someone say, like, caller from Brooklyn. You don't see any Trump voters out there. There's a significant percentage of people in Brooklyn.
Hasids. They're all,
not just
a lot
Hasids,
of them are
Russian immigrants.
Russian immigrants, right?
And you have a lot of immigrants.
And they had to clean up the border. All right. So, what is next taxi scam?
I mean, I talked to probably at least 100 people over the weekend when I was canvassing for Julia Salazar in Bushwick. And I got 2 people who told me they were Republicans. And one was a black guy, one was a Hispanic guy. But 2 out of more than 100 is, pretty low still.
That's 2%.
It'd be honestly.
I'm aware.
It'd be remarkable if there was absolutely 0.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. That would be sort of.
That would be like just an anomaly of any. Also, so that's also, by the way, I would say, I don't know, where these people are from, but the people from the Caribbean actually would be absolutely another very potentially gettable vote for Republicans if they weren't such abject apartheid promoters.
If they couldn't,
yes,
if
they
their
were
racism wasn't just sort of the organizing principle, right?
Yes.
Can't you just pretend you're not racist for a couple of minutes to help yourself gain power?
There's people who,
He
but
still
no.
got,
Too hard.
29% of Hispanic voters went for Trump despite all the
wasn't that high.
horrible rhetoric.
It wasn't that high.
It wasn't?
I think it was 20.
I think it was pretty high.
20-something?
It was 22, I think.
If you take away,
But Puerto Rican
and that number,
and
number,
Cuban.
I think, is also higher than it would be had you had a male Democratic candidate. That is
Higher than it would be if we'd had a better Democratic candidate too, probably.
I'm pretty sure if you had another woman, you would see a similar number in terms of Latinos. I think, maybe not exactly, but
careful.
No, I mean, I think there is. I think within certain Latin American cultures, the
data that I've seen that's available on that really ultra micro targeted thing is that was the type of voter that was suckered by the populism primarily
versus
a gender break.
Really?
Now maybe they're not saying it publicly.
I don't know. I remember that caller that we had.
Oh yeah,
It was 29%.
She was talking.
It was 29%.
According to USA Today.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say but also another thing too is disaggregating between even just Cubans as an example and how much they weight it versus other groups.
Right,
That's a very funky
right.
stat in and of itself.
Yeah, and the economics that goes into who gets to vote in the first place too.
So this was nice. I mean, it's one thing to support a policy where you are actually kidnapping children. It's another to bask in it. And down in Huntsville, Alabama, one of 750 rallies to keep families together. I mean, that's the thing, is that like to keep families together. I understand when you're doing
free,
sort of
free, keep them free, not in a detention facility where they're all held together indefinitely.
But it's also like, don't kidnap children. But I guess you want to broaden it for a broader sense of immigrant rights. But here it is, Huntsville, on Saturday, June 30th, in Big Spring Park, a man who's obviously a huge fan of Corey Lewandowski is there listening to the prayer delivered by an Episcopal priest, delivered to about 100 people who were around this gazebo, talking about the inhumanity of our policies. And this guy pulls a Lewandowski.
We also have Rosa Toussaint Ortiz, who was born in the Dominican Republic and grew up in Puerto Rico. She is an Army veteran, ordained minister, founder of Huntsville International Help Center, Inc., and has been an advocate for the Hispanic community for over 10 years. They are going to provide a convocation and a prayer for all of us. Thank you.
There he goes.
Let us pray. Holy and ever-loving God, we pray for the children of this nation and all nations. We offer your love to all of our children.
Yeah. And then this same guy...
Gotta stop being condescending to Republican voters, man.
Yeah.
You gotta recognize their real economic concerns.
Well, this is the problem. When you start to do these Episcopal prayers, you are asking for it. You are poking them in the eye.
Right. If you're going to talk about all God's children and you're some chick in a gazebo, I mean, they have no choice.
Yeah, goddamn coastal elites and their Episcopal prayers.
Here is that same guy. He turns out to be a guy named Shane Ryan Seeley. He's 34 years old. And apparently the reason why I know his name is because, he's not just emboldened by knowing that Corey Lewandowski is in his corner. Apparently the dude had a gun.
Pray for the strength of this nation and world to unite and for love to triumph over hate. Amen.
Oh my God. Oh my God. He just shot a gun.
Firearm! Gun! Gun! Gun!
He has a gun!
Gun!
I got a gun. He had a gun!
En el nombre de Jesús, venimos delante de tu presencia, Padre Celestial. Primeramente para darte gracias.
Gun! He has a gun!
There they go. Now, of course, if this guy was African American, we would have already heard the gunshots ring out. And
I'll be waiting to see if they give him a catch and release with zero fine or something like that.
At least they arrested him. I mean, you're being bad when you're a white guy and the cops come and arrest you for...
Jeff Sessions is like, why is his hair so long?
Exactly.
I appreciate the sentiment, but what kind of a sloppy attire is that?
He looks like he smokes marijuana.
People should look it up. But
smoking the Negro's devil stick?
Almost too many incidents of cops siding with the right-wing side of protests around the country over the weekend.
Almost.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
In Portland and Atlanta.
Yeah, there was a lot in Portland.
They watched the Proud Boys kick the shit out of Antifa.
Yeah, do we have that? Do we have video of that? In the meantime, let's play this clip. It's from last week. This is pretty nuts. Speaking of, we just watched a white guy in Alabama who waved the gun at a protest. People started yelling "gun," and the cops just sort of strolled up to him nicely. I mean, they surrounded him, but there was no.
They drove the car on the grass.
Yeah, that's right. They drove the car on the grass slowly, and went whoop whoop with their and then it was
they have
all
like
over.
a special white people tone siren.
All right, compare and contrast that with this unarmed black man who is trying to obey the orders of two different cops who are saying two different things. Put your legs out straight. And the other one's saying, put your legs out straight, cross them. And watch what happens to Sean Williams. He's sitting on the curb. There's one male officer. You'll hear the two voices telling him to put his legs straight out in front of him. The female officer is telling him to cross his legs. So I guess it's just a question of which one of them is going to tase him.
Just sit, bro.
Straight out. Straight out. Straight out. Hey. Legs straight out or get taser. Straight out. Straight out.
Put your legs straight out and cross them now.
Oh, come on, bro.
Oh, he's not listening.
You're really gonna tase him? He was sitting down, though, bro.
On your stomach. On your stomach. On your stomach. On your stomach. Arms out like an airplane. Stay back.
I live here.
Stay back.
Yeah.
Arms out like an airplane. Arms out like an airplane all the way. Arms out like an airplane.
There you go. Straight out. And he clearly wasn't sure.
He just didn't know what to respond to. They were giving him totally contradictory direct. I mean, we just saw that.
Like that horrible video where they're playing that game of Simon Says with the guy who's like crying and terrified for his life, and they eventually shoot him.
Yep.
I mean, it's possible this video saved the guy's life. On the one hand, it's like, well, I guess the video isn't preventing them from behaving in a horrible way towards him. But on the other hand, what would have happened without it?
Speaking of police training, my understanding is that in New York City, and I don't know how much, to be honest with you, the police get trained in terms of their firearms. I think it's probably less than we would anticipate.
Do-do-do.
Do-do-do.
Yeah, I went to Jersey, popped off a couple of frickin' rounds. Now we got some Dominican kids bust up.
But the hit rate, I think, for cops when they're firing their firearms in New York City is somewhere around like 20%. 1 out of 5 times they hit their target. Something like that. And I may be wrong, but that's what I understand the number is. Well, in Texas, they are doing a lot of school martial training. A lot of school martial training. And, of course, and this is part of training is to fail. But here's a prime example of something that we're probably sadly going to see more of if any of these school marshals start rolling out into the schools. And remember, these are not. It's not like a special squad of people. It's just like I work at a high school. I'm going to get a chance to go play paintball.
Yeah, think of your social studies teacher.
Exactly. The guy in the yellow.
I think my mom did very well.
The guy in the yellow is an observer, ostensibly like a student or a teacher in this scenario. And the two guys going down are probably like the gym teacher and the guy who does geometry.
That's who I'd want.
Yeah, here we go. Oops.
Well, I guess you don't need to worry about your homework anymore, Tommy.
I do. I wonder if the Blaze Orange industry is really getting in on these student uniform contracts. Like, if we're gonna have these guys, we're gonna need to mark them like this.
Yeah, except for the problem is like, how are you going to go put on your special "Don't Shoot Me" shirts?
Wear them every day.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's just, I can't even. All right, let's do this last clip. This one's pretty funny. I'm not a huge John Legend fan, necessarily. I mean,
you have a problem with John Legend?
As far as
I didn't say I have a problem with that.
You're just literally not a big. Have you even heard any of his music?
Maybe.
So that's what are you talking about?
It's pretty.
Why don't you just do the honest? I've never heard him.
No,
I have no idea.
I'm sure I've heard his music. I've definitely heard,
but
of
I couldn't
him.
recognize it.
No, in fact,
Right.
if John Legend was standing right where you are, I wouldn't
You
even.
would say,
I
are
would
you a
say-
friend of Michael's?
I would say, yeah. What's going on here? What do we?
Did he? Did you? A couple years ago, I do want to say, University of Pennsylvania commencement. He included Palestinian rights in a commencement address, which is very unusual and very much to his credit.
Good for
Yes.
him.
No, I think he's. I mean, but I just don't know him from a music standpoint. I only know him from a celebrity point.
No, it's like Ace of Base. It's just
I have no
neither here nor
idea
there
who
for you.
Chrissy Teigen is either. His wife. But
he said his wife.
Chrissy Teigen.
Yeah,
catching up on a lot of things. Kanye released a lot.
But
this summer.
I think it's important. It's super important for celebrities to set the tone. I know. Of course, this is going to cause a lot of Trump voters to decide that they don't like brown people because, well, I mean, not the least of which John Legend saying this, but that they don't like brown people because liberals and leftists and centrists or whatever are scolding them and are not paying the proper respect to America's sweetheart, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. But John Legend and his wife, Chrissy Teigen, I guess, were leaving Beverly Hills, and he was asked by a TMZ reporter. I mean, this is how sort of desperate they are to get comment. If Legend was upset that the one woman who apparently is part of the Real Housewives of Atlanta, and we're going deep into territory I have no idea about, had gone too far when she fat-shamed White House President Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, apparently she said she's not missing any meals. She'll be all right.
That's actually not bad.
And she said, ask me, should we be reuniting 2,000 kids with their, listen to what John Legend had to say.
Now, since
we love you guys. Her personal attacks on Sarah Sanders appropriate? She got fat shamed by.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
By Claudia Jordan. I mean, should we be personally attacking politicians even if they're on the other side of the aisle?
Ask me, should we be reuniting 2,000 kids with their family? Ask me that.
Should we be reuniting?
Yes, we should. I don't care about fucking Sarah Sanders.
Yes, sir.
Reunite the fucking kids with their families. And then we'll talk about Sarah Sanders and her fucking dinners.
Yeah, I hear that. Thank you for your time, sir.
There you go.
That was great. The way he even did like in a shaved high school, okay, sir, you're right. I did ask you an absolutely unbelievably stupid and actually in many ways morally repugnant question given what's happening right now. Sorry, Mr. Legend.
Well, you know
My bosses are friends with Trump.
You know
and
what?
they told me to
Honestly,
ask
though,
you.
Yeah, right.
Here's the thing that's so instructive about that. The idea that you would equate the incivility of Sarah Sanders Huckabee not having an opportunity to eat at a restaurant with the kidnapping of 2,000 children is completely, almost hard to believe. But this is a reporter for TMZ. Okay? And on some level, that level of base goading is understandable from an entertainment reporter. But the idea that this, that one would even draw a parallel or even contemplating the incivility of not seating Sarah Huckabee Sanders when she is shilling for a government that is kidnapping children and doing so only with the justification that they're not American.
Well, to be
I'm
fair,
gonna pretend that
the thing they were
we
asking
live
about-
in Twitter in like 2014. I'm going to ask you a really annoying hot take on problematic jokes instead of what's happening to 2,000
Well, no,
children
the
that have
thing-
just been kidnapped. That's totally a good use of our time.
I mean, it is relevant to the thing they were asking him about, which was the fat shaming part of it, that Chrissy Teigen is a body positivity advocate. Like, that's a lot of what she does on social media.
The
But, like,
idea,
that is
first of all, the idea that John Legend and Chrissy Teigen are monitoring what one of the stars of Atlanta's Real Housewives, it's like, it's literally the functional equivalent of saying, like, are you concerned that there is a person who lives in New Jersey who mocked Sarah Sanders because she's fat?
I mean, they
No.
do talk. She does talk a lot about that stuff, but I think, and like, I don't like it that people are going at her from the fat angle, but like, it's not the hill I want to die on. I think my response would be the same as like Roxanne Gay's. Like, I'm not going to stand up for these people in any way, shape, or form.
To me, it's
Of
also
course.
it's also clearly an excuse to use the current like conversation and fill that up with nonsense. That's
Right.
not nearly as important as the
Yes.
missing kids.
Yeah, that's the big takeaway. And that's why you just can't give an inch on any of this bullshit, regardless of where it's coming from.
Calling from a 732 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. This is Alex Rosenbaum, or I shouldn't do the last name, from Edison, New Jersey. How are you doing?
Good, Alan. Your phone is not very good, buddy. Got to be quick here.
Okay, I'll try to be quick.
Oh, that's better.
I'm calling. I don't like you going too hard on Jimmy Dore, and if I can, I'd like to explain why.
Yes, please do. I'm very interested in hearing this. I have to say, I haven't. I don't think I've said Jimmy Dore's name in weeks, if not months.
Whoa, hold up. I'm
What's
sorry to interrupt. I was gone last week. You really did not mention him when the Kennedy thing happened?
No.
That
I don't
is
think so. Did
great.
we?
That is
Wait.
unbelievable.
Okay.
Are you
All right,
serious?
Wait. Let me be fair. Let me be fair, Alan. Hold on. You're right. We did do some timed audio drops. But that was not me. That was not me. That was not me commenting.
Like,
I didn't say anything.
I really was going to be.
It was Matt did it. I did suggest that might be good time for it, but I did not say anything about him. But your point stands. All right, continue. Why should I not? Why should I not criticize? Let me just ask you this: why should I not criticize someone who was so myopic that the idea that Donald Trump could even appoint one Supreme Court justice didn't occur to him because he didn't know what the filibuster was. And that my expressing concern about it was the equivalent of me being concerned that the moon would fall into Lake Michigan. So explain to me, what now?
Okay, number one, even if every Jill Stein voter, myself included, voted for Hillary Clinton, Trump would still win. Number two, you're exact on every issue, pretty much.
All right, hold on for 1 second. Let me just address that.
What?
The reality is that I don't think there is ever a world where every Jill Stein voter would have voted for Hillary Clinton. But from a technical standpoint, if every Jill Stein voter did vote for Hillary Clinton, yes, she probably would have won. But that's not important.
Okay.
I'm not even talking about you as a Jill Stein voter. I think it was a mistake. You can vote the way you want. I think it's dumb. But what Jimmy Dore did and uses his platform for, all right, because I happen to believe that you have a responsibility if you have hundreds of thousands of people who are subscribed to your YouTube channel. If you have 50, 60, 100,000 people watching your videos per video, I happen to think you have a responsibility to know what the fuck you're talking about. And Jimmy Dore, I don't care if he agrees with me on every single issue. He may. I may be to the left with him on some, actually. I don't know to what, frankly, extent he has a depth in his understanding of any of these things because he doesn't even know how the Supreme Court works. He doesn't know what the filibuster is. And he's out there telling people it doesn't make a difference who they vote for because Hillary Clinton is functionally the same as Donald Trump. And that is demonstrably untrue. And so I don't blame Jill Stein voters. I blame people who are going out there and misinforming people as to the implications and ostensibly being, there with the platform he inherited from the Young Turks and spreading bullshit. What's your second point?
I don't think he... Okay, the second point is he advances progressive people and ideas just as much as you do. Really?
Tell me about the advance that we now have in the Supreme Court. What about the record number of federal judges who are there for life? No, he sets back progressivism. Do you understand that for decades,
he had on a show Jim Keedy. He had on the show Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez.
Great.
He had a show.
Great.
All the other Justice Democrats.
Great. Let him read for 5 minutes.
That is great.
Yeah, and don't forget his bizarre vendetta against Bernie Sanders because he won't come on his show.
What's the response? Maybe Jimmy is just so caught up in his own sort of his own issues that they're just projected out to people. And at the very least, you should do is just do a little bit of civics reading before you start talking about this stuff. I mean, look, yes, I'm happy he had Jim Keedy on. I'm happy he had Ocasio-Cortez on. That's great. But if you're and I don't criticize him for having those people on. I criticize him for being a moron.
I don't think
you have a third point.
I counter that I would say he's a comedian.
Oh, I remember he's a comedian because that's what he said to me when I said, Jimmy, that's not what the filibuster is. They didn't filibuster. They just decided not to have a hearing for Merrick Garland. He says, oh, I'm just a comedian. Well, guess what? If you're just a comedian, then, and frankly, I think comedians can read too. If you're just a comedian, you should still be accurate about some of the more basic aspects of our government.
He should know that, but I don't think you should be slamming him just because he made one technical mistake.
No, it's not one technical mistake, buddy. You don't know enough about this. Listen, if he's just a comedian, how does he have the ability to determine that Hillary Clinton has Parkinson's from watching a video of her fainting?
I don't believe. I watch him all the time.
Google it. Google it. Google Jimmy Dore, Clinton, Parkinson. Now, you do your homework.
You're making okay. I like you and I like him, but you're making him out to be like Rush Limbaugh.
No, I'm not making him out to be Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh is very smart. He's very calculating what he's doing. And what he does is not working against what he proposed, what he argues is his agenda. No.
If Rush Limbaugh came out and spent a year
I am making him out to be exactly who he is. Someone who, for whatever reason, I can't divine intent. I mean, someone could say, oh, hey, Jimmy found a recipe that raised his subscribers on YouTube and generated more cash for him. No. Look, the bottom line is the guy is disingenuous. He didn't do his homework. He was spouting off. And I have every right to criticize him, to distance myself from that type of garbage going out there.
All right. I love all you guys. Can I get a Michael Brooks impression?
Yes, you can. Hi, I'm Michael Brooks.
Nice. Well, good job trying to persuade Hillary Sam. It's never going to happen. He's in the tank. He's mini MSNBC. And he just worships and submits to the establishment every single day because he hates you. He has contempt and fear. Don't vote out of fear.
All right, just be careful because the moon's going to probably fall into a couple of other bodies of water soon, too.
So I say vote third party, no matter what, no matter where you are. I don't care if you're in a swing state.
Wow.
Yeah, dude.
That is pretty fucking damning. And I also love, like, somebody retweeted Adolph Reed's piece from the summer of 2016 is something like, you got to vote for the lying neoliberal warmonger. It's important this time. And
Right.
it's just like, and it's so frustrating that like even someone like Adolph Reed even needed to write that piece because there even was an audience for this nonsense.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing, is that people say that Jill Stein voters, in terms, if they had all voted for Hillary Clinton, she wouldn't want. Well, they would have, but I don't expect all Hillary Clinton voters, all Jill Stein voters ever in any scenario. I don't even know if I would expect 3/4 of them necessarily to have voted, 1/4 of them or 1/2 of them to have voted for Hillary Clinton if Jill Stein wasn't running or whatnot. And Jill Stein has every right to run and try and win, I guess. I wouldn't have necessarily
try and win.
To do whatever, to scorch earth, to do it, right? But people sort of discount this notion. Look, there's one of two things are true. One, everything that we do on this show every day, and everything that Jimmy Dore does on his show whenever he does his show, is absolutely meaningless. Nobody listens. It doesn't inform anybody's opinion. It doesn't have any type of ripple effect. It absolutely means absolutely nothing. And when you write something on Twitter, it means absolutely nothing. And if it's true of me and Jimmy Dore meaning absolutely nothing, then it's got to be at least negligible when Neera Tandon's on Twitter or when any of these other people.
Right.
Look, it's either you believe this stuff matters and it's immeasurable to know what the impact is, or you believe it matters. You can't have it both ways. You can't get on Twitter and chastise people who are chastising Jill Stein and then say none of these people could have impacted the election, because then it doesn't matter that they're chastising Jill Stein either.
I would suggest
you either buy into the premise that when people put stuff out there, it means something, or you don't. So there's no point in you defending anybody if you don't think that anything that anybody else says has an impact anyways. And so I operate under the premise, it may be false, that Jimmy Dore had some influence, and maybe just at the margins. But the fact of the matter is, more people listen to this program on a daily basis than the margin that existed in the 3 states that Donald Trump won. And so, and it's certainly true with Jimmy Dore. And so, and I have no idea.
I'd also like
not necessarily in those states, I should say, but look, I don't know. I don't know if Jimmy Dore saying something influences someone else to say something, who influences somebody else to say one, and someone just stays home.
I think
someone stays home and says like,
that's
I'm not
the
going to
big
vote
point.
because it's it's one or the other.
That's the big point. It's muddying the waters. Like Waz and I actually talked about this Kanye thing and a while back, and then one of the points he made that was so obvious that people weren't talking about in the data is, it's like, you might have actually made a similar point too. It's like, it isn't just like, it's not, I'm going to vote Republican now. It's another 5% that says fuck it. Makes no difference.
Makes no difference. Why should I bother voting?
And in addition to that, what also Jimmy contributed to, and actually, frankly, in my opinion, Jill Stein, the whole lot of them, is taking some really good values and some really perceptive and correct instincts about where we are and turning it into like moralistic performance art with absolutely zero understanding of the stakes and getting people off in dumb internet rabbit holes instead of real politics and strategy. And that's a major harm for what is still a very nascent and small any type of progressive and or socialist movement.
And I'll tell you, like, in some respects, it's just be honest about it. I mean, get out there and say, like, look, we could lose the Supreme Court. In fact, it's likely that we will lose the Supreme Court for generations, for 30 years. People will lose in half the states in the country. I mean, this is all, everything I'm saying now, I said probably to the day 2 years ago in July of 2016. Half the states in the country, it will be illegal to get an abortion, either effectively or literally. And if he had said that and said, like, and it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Vote third party. That doesn't matter. And in some respects, they did. I mean, like, I don't know. His partner on Aggressive Progressive said, what difference does it make if we get Peter Thiel as a Supreme Court justice?
Oh, it can make a lot of difference.
I mean, we should be so lucky at this point. And that would have been a nightmare.
A true nightmare.
People are weird about it on both sides of the issue, I think. On the one hand, there are people who think that voting is all we need to do in order to get
I don't know a single person.
reform
I don't know a single
or
person who
socialism
knows that
in this
though.
country.
I don't know a single
David
person.
Axelrod, who's like,
David Axelrod's
what do
not
we need
talking
to do
about
right
socialism.
now? Or even progressivism, even reform.
Who?
David Axelrod, he's like, oh, people need to be more civil to the
I am
Republicans
perfectly willing to
and
say to
just
people,
vote.
don't
Just
listen
donate
to Jimmy
Democrats
Dore's
and vote.
podcast,
And
don't listen to David Axelrod's
Can I
podcast.
finish?
Sure. But
yeah,
that's
can
not-
I
but-
finish what I'm saying about it, though?
Do you have any other
And then on the other
examples?
side, people are like, oh, don't vote for Hillary Clinton because she's a lying neoliberal warmonger. It's like, you got to do more than vote, but you also got to vote.
Well,
like,
of
why would you
course,
give up
of course.
any power available
Of
to
course.
you, even though when you have so little already?
I mean, I've made this point to Jamie. Like, I do think that a lot of those people are waiting for the perfect candidate that will just come through and fix everything. And Jimmy Dore is sort of creating that need, right? That's not how we should even approach voting.
And look, it's also, I will say,
they both fetishize it.
less than Rush Limbaugh. If I was to compare Jimmy Dore to the impact that Jimmy Dore has, it seems to me it's more like Alex Jones, because it's taking some legitimate anger and outrage and funneling it in like a dry well. Right? It's just like, I'm going to take this and I'm going to funnel it into a place where it can absolutely do nothing. He thinks that what he's doing is shaking up the system. And all he's doing is saying, like, take your power and funnel it into somewhere where it has, we're going to just go down this rabbit hole.
There's a term that describes this, and it's been used in other contexts, but it really fits here. It's called being a useful idiot.
I mean, I think in many respects, this, to take that outrage and say the key is, and it's not like, the thing is, Jimmy Dore probably focused more on electoral politics than we did.
Yeah, that's
Definitely,
exactly the thing.
without a doubt.
Because it was all done, all done. That's the ultimate irony.
No, we were like, vote what causes minimal harm, and then here are myriad other ways that you can engage in politics. And here's the State of the Union movement. Here's different examples from different countries and different ways of doing things. There's no contradiction, and it should be something. It should be something that doesn't even need to be said.
Yeah, that's the other thing about it. Like, if you really believe that, voting for Democrats versus Republicans has no impact. Like, I know people who have like a principled anarchist stance on this who are out there doing a lot of other things to push progress forward. I think it's silly to give up the power of the vote, whatever little power it is, but they're out there doing things, they're like mutual aid, noise demonstrations at prisons, like ICE occupation, all this stuff. Jimmy's not doing any of those things as far as I know.
Well, to be fair, he's got, I think he's playing someplace in Orange County this week.
My cynical reading of a lot of those, like anybody who didn't vote that is a Jimmy Dore in the Jimmy Dore audience, I think was looking for a reason not to vote the entire time.
I think that's true. And I think that kind of personal narcissism as politics is antithetical to the left of any sort.
Calling from a 740 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, this is Alex in Houston.
Hello, Alex in Houston. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I was curious with regards to the Supreme Court and court packing conversation that you had the other day.
Yeah.
I have a tendency to agree with you that should be the move for Democrats and progressives going forward. But I was wondering if you thought there was an end game to that at all, if it leads to another direction as far as the Supreme Court goes.
by saying like an end game is the idea that, well, the idea would be that you would unwind a lot of these decisions. I think the other I mean, I don't know if you mean what happens the next time a Republican gets into office.
Yeah, I think I would say that's probably more accurate.
I mean, here's the thing: is that the Supreme Court, I think, personally, was so exposed in its Bush v. Gore ruling that it should have lost all credibility at that time. Frankly, I mean, I found that ruling to be so egregious, and frankly, were it not for 9/11, I think that we would have already reckoned with that. In fact, the September 13th, 2001 Newsweek cover, back when Newsweek were actually magazines, was about the riff on the Supreme Court. Was supposedly retelling a story about when Russian, coincidentally, judges came over and they have like an annual meeting with our Supreme Court justices to talk about democracy and rule of law, et cetera, et cetera. That it sort of like burst out into the open in a way that was sort of relatively unprecedented. I don't know what that kind of reform constitutes, but there has to be a public reckoning. There has to be a public reckoning. I mean, and if Bush v. Gore didn't do it, then this Merrick Garland seat.
Do you think they should have a lifetime appointment?
I think there's going to have to be reform. Yeah. I think if that reform ends up being, they serve 16 years, or somebody had developed.
Yeah, I saw one that was.
Somebody had developed a mechanism of like a specific term that would make sure that it's relatively balanced, the appointments that would take place. And I think probably what we will see, if not, look, here's the way it works, right? Here's the end game. The Democratic Party accepts the notion of court packing, and there is, amongst the voters of the Democratic Party, there is an expectation that the next Democratic president will expand the size of the court. Then, faced with this, the idea is you hope for some type of reform that might look like term limits or some other. That would probably be the biggest one.
I saw one, term limits for 18 years, and then every president gets to assign 2.
Right, and that's basically.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so I think that's probably the more likely end game. But you got to get to that point where there is a center of gravity in the Democratic Party which accepts this. And that's a, we had, I can't remember the authors now, but we had these authors on who, and maybe this was probably 4 or 5 years ago. Why Countries Fail. It wasn't Darren. What? Why Democracies Die. Levitsky, right? And they, I think, they felt that, and I think Darren I can't pronounce his last name, but who wrote why not Collapse, that was Jared Diamond, but another book, Darren Asimoglu, I can't pronounce his last name. Yes, he argued that the court packing was a very dangerous outcome because it was fundamentally undemocratic. Now, of course, the reason why nations fail, the reason why the reason why FDR threatened the court with court packing was because they were being undemocratic and not responding to what the people had basically called for via the election. So there is a very, very strong institutional bias against court packing. And so the idea is you make it a popular sentiment, and if you have to trade that for term limits, then that's, I think, a relatively positive outcome. Appreciate the call. Let's go to 509 area code. You're calling from a 509 area code.
Hey, Sam. This is Ronald Reagan.
Oh, hello, Ronald Reagan. What's on your mind?
A couple things. I think a good argument for court packing is that you should have Chemerinsky on to talk about this. Is that the Supreme Court has been getting less and less done every year for like the last 20 or 30 years. They hear less cases, and the world is more complicated. So I think there's a good argument, not just that the Supreme Court should be packed, so to speak, but that it should be, doubled in size at least.
Just from an efficacy standpoint, yes. I mean, I think that's, you want to make that argument when there's a Democratic president as opposed to a Republican president. But we saw the Republicans trying to limit the D.C. Circuit Court from 11 to 8. And they did this because they had the majority and they knew that Obama was going to fill those seats. That's the only thing really that is even remotely mitigating what's going on today in terms of these agencies. But I don't know how long that lasts, but go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about immigration stuff, I guess, real quick. The administration is ramping up efforts to detain families by probably the tens of thousands. It looks like they're preparing more tent cities and things like that. And so I hope that people are ready to oppose mass family detention as vocally as they were family separation or family kidnapping, which is a good framing of that issue, I think, Sam. Because to the extent, I guess detaining families together is better, but that's only because the window has shifted so far to Crazyville that we now view it as some sort of reasonable alternative.
If we lose 2,000 kids, we kidnap and lose 2,000 kids, people are going to be thankful that we're detaining whole families in warehouses for 8 months at a time.
That's right. You should be polite to Sarah, too.
We didn't lose any of the kids this time. So
that's right.
Big
that's,
up.
Our position. That's what we did. We did lose the kids this time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been really weird. Last week I met with a bunch of, I had a lot of consultations with people who have actually been paroled. So that means they were let in to seek asylum over the last few months. And to listen to their stories, and some of them came with their kids, and they're here, and they're living with family members, and they're checking in with ICE, and they're talking to attorneys to try and figure out, what are their options, and this is such a fabricated crisis because I've been having these consultations with these people since I practiced, and really, the numbers went up a little bit in 2014, but it's just not a crisis. It's not anything we can't handle, and to hear their stories, a lot of these people, I got into a little bit of an argument with my racist uncle this weekend, but on Facebook, one of the big misconceptions is that everybody in the world wants to come here. And even the people who have come here, a lot of times, didn't want to. They had a fine life in Mexico or Honduras until the unspeakable happened. And they live in a place where they can't report those crimes to the police. And so they risk their lives. That's the other thing is it's already really dangerous to try and cross the border. And people do it anyways knowing they might die. And so the idea that, we're going to be able to just ramp up the deterrence, I think is well,
that's why what we need to
misguided.
do is really start to lop off fingers, I think. Fingers and arms of people who come across the border. Right? I mean, that's what needs to happen to have a deterrent. Or landmines. Landmines, I think, would also be.
really wouldn't put that one out there.
Right?
I bet that's a serious policy consideration. I mean, maybe the finger and arms thing might be a joke. I would be shocked if they are considering stuff like landmines. Besides, we're also the only major industrialized country that isn't a signature to the International Landmine Treaty, so that helps.
Yeah. So thanks for putting that out there, Sam.
All right, well.
What about landmines, guys? I can't believe you never thought of that.
Anyways,
lasers. I could have lasers and they could cut ladies' fingers off.
Lasers is not a bad idea. But, yeah, so I think I with my uncle, I said, you know, all these same justifications that you're giving me were used to turn away boatloads of Jews during World War II who were summarily murdered when they were returned. You know, these same sort of, you know, policy concerns and, oh, well, they don't have the right paperwork. And plus, you know, if we let these ones in, there's going to be more to follow. And we can kind of see that was a mistake now, I would hope. And he disagreed. He said, well, they were justified in turning them around. So,
wrong, dude. Yeah.
Tough sell.
That's where you're wrong. Less Jews, better Jews.
I think I think it's a good argument, but I think it's also another indication that there's, you know, the Trump crowd we're just not going to get, and it's almost not worth engaging those people. But I do have one other quick question about the P-tape. I have a really depressing job, and for people who are out there, you know, thinking that maybe this life isn't worth living, just please remember that you might live to see the P-tape.
That's right.
And for me, that's really getting me through some rough times. And
how is
I
this
do wonder,
helping you?
You said that the Republicans will never impeach Trump, but I do wonder. Let's say there's a P-tape, and let's say it's dropped in its entirety. And I'm watching it, by the way, all of it, with the volume on.
On the biggest TV in the house.
Right.
I'm gonna link up my Samsung, whatever number of inches it is. Anyways, do you think going into the midterm election that Republicans would be able to stand by Trump and field questions about the P-tape, which has been lied about, and which basically backs up the Steele dossier and all of that stuff? I feel like that could be.
Wow, I don't.
That could be
hang in there. Hang in there.
Think about it.
Let me just tell you.
Yeah, could you imagine? It wouldn't even be him, but I am picturing the Paul Ryan, like, you know, I don't lie. I don't go. I'm not interested in that
I'm not
sort
going
of
to
stuff.
talk about pee.
I'm just kind of like, people are talking about pee and what and prostitutes. Here's what we're going to do. We're trying to cut regulations.
I'm not going to kink shame anybody. I'm not going to get in that business. I'm not going to do it.
Well, that would be the TMZ question.
Paul Ryan's going to be woke all of a sudden.
What's that?
Republicans are going to go full Jamie. Republicans are going to go full Jamie on the P-tape.
Right.
Yeah, they're going to get woke.
Super woke on sexual kinks. That would be interesting. That could revive some careers too, if you think about it. Larry Craig's running for office again.
Yep.
Anyways.
All right. Appreciate the call.
Thanks for the call. Think about the P-tape.
Yeah, I will. I will think about the P-tape constantly.
As if he doesn't already.
I'm constantly thinking about the P-tape. Calling from a 610 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. Mike from PA. How are
Mike from PA. It's been too long. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the implications of the Supreme Court and what we can do to react. So I think everybody needs to just come to terms with the fact that Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned, and abortion rights are about to suffer an extreme attack in this country.
Right.
But one thing that people might not know is that a lot of blue states are not safe. For example, Illinois has a pre-Roe ban on the books, and they have a Republican governor. So I would be very concerned about that. That governor is up for election this year. So if you want to save abortion rights, you need to get involved in your state level politics right now. all in all, according to the Center for Reproductive Rights, 21 states have pre-viability bans, which means bans on abortion prior to viability. So something like 20 weeks or heartbeat bills that have since been blocked by court action, but are still technically on the books. 4 states have outright trigger bans where if Roe is overturned immediately, every single abortion doctor becomes a felon. So that's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's no avoiding it. The time to avoid it was 2016. So how do we react? We have to take state legislatures back. We have to take governorships. That is where I focus my attention, personally and in my career, is on state legislature. Here in Pennsylvania, right now, the Republicans have a supermajority in the Pennsylvania Senate, and they have a large majority in the Pennsylvania House. We have a relatively progressive governor, Tom Wolf, who's up for election this year. And even if he's reelected, if some things bad results happen in the state house, they could overturn his veto. So we need to make gains, even in these small races that don't get a lot of attention. If you're listening to this show, if you're politically engaged, you need to find some swing seats in your state legislature and start volunteering. Kick them $50, because these rights are fundamentally under attack. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the list of things that I could name, we could take 20 minutes. But hopefully the concept of abortion doctors being stepped on by SWAT teams and put into prison will wake you up. Maybe not. But please consider helping. For those of us in Eastern Pennsylvania, we have major races happening. I think we have 3 congressional swing seats if you're in the eastern half of Pennsylvania. There are 4 or 5 swing state Senate seats on the eastern side of Pennsylvania for the state Senate. We just need to pick up 1 to break that supermajority.
Yep.
And there are 7 Clinton seats held by Republicans right now running in this cycle, and 4 more in the next one in 2 years. So the path to the majority and actually actively protecting these rights is there if we make gains now. We have no time to lose. And, I know this can be a little bit disconcerting and nerve-wracking. Sometimes I feel it. It's a lot of pressure. But everybody has to, get up. If you believe in any of these things, this is not the time for anything but popular front. We can't waste our time squabbling over small differences, which sometimes even I get caught up in. But, we're in desperate straits, and no time to lose. So if you want to help me in the race that I'm running, it's votemarktinsley.com. He is the only Our Revolution endorsed state senator in Pennsylvania. So if you could help him out, help build the Bernie movement, that would be great. We got we're building our DSA in Lehigh Valley. Unfortunately, the chapter isn't nationally recognized yet, so he couldn't even be a DSA candidate, which is unfortunate for him. But we need, help. And I can say one more thing. And then,
Sure.
and then,
Well, you could still give him. You could still give him help, though, right? With your field operations and everything. It doesn't matter if it's officially called the DSA or not.
Yeah, we're building. We're building that. And obviously, I wear a lot of hats in the local area and try to push a lot of things. But yeah, no, we definitely, we're building a huge field program. Greg Edwards narrowly lost our Democratic primary and in May, and we would have had a complete clean sweep, but unfortunately, I don't think people were fully engaged yet. And so we have a decent liberal running, Susan Wild, for Congress. My area is basically ground zero for that, for the entire, Pennsylvania. So how we do is going to determine, like, do people think the Bernie movement is a threat? Like you could see with Cortez, she won that one primary for one congressional seat. And now her ideas are everywhere.
Right.
It's on network TV. You know, it's MSNBC's explainers. What is democratic socialism? Like, that's just one congressional seat. So if you make, that's why it's valuable to get involved and help politicians, even if you disagree with them on a couple things, because if they're willing to step up and say, I'm a progressive, or I believe in Medicare for all, or I believe in democratic socialism, that is going
pushes
to
stuff forward.
Get more people exposed to the idea. Most people aren't even exposed to these ideas, let alone considering them. So that is why it's so important.
Mike,
all right, thank you.
I agree with everything you said. Can I just add on something about tactics? Like, I mean, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I feel like we need more widespread consciousness of the fact that there are other tactics available to us in addition to everything that Mike just said.
I think what Mike is saying, that one of the ways to get widespread consciousness is electing people like that.
Not just consciousness, though, but like impact, effectiveness. Like, people should be rioting in the streets if Roe versus Wade is overturned. People should be striking. There should be a massive wave of general strikes. We have so much power that people don't realize that we have. And we need to be doing all of these things at once. So absolutely, vote for Democrats, vote for better Democrats. You know, the Democratic Party has done a pretty bad job protecting abortion rights in the past. Perhaps better Democrats will do a better job in the future. But just in case, we need to be doing all these other things as well. So I just want people to remember that you have options. I'm not an accelerationist. I did not want this to happen. I just said, like, don't throw away your vote if you live in a swing state. But like, now that it is happening, we have no choice. So please remember that.
All right. The final call of the day is from a 352 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
I'll take it. This is Sandy from Gainesville, Florida.
What's going on, Sandy? We got to be quick.
Got to be quick. Okay. I was blown away the other day. I'm listening to a Malcolm Gladwell podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And he glowingly refers to our friend, who's a Canadian nut job, Peterson.
Oh, God. Really?
Yes, man. It gets worse. So he introduces his podcast. It's basically he wants to have Malcolm Gladwell's one step. You know how one rule. You know, Jordan Peterson has his 12, and so Malcolm's going to have his 1. So it's an interesting podcast. They're talking about so he basically, says, this guy's a Canadian neuroscientist or whatever, and his book's a bestseller. It's awesome. All these other people are doing these 12 rules, and so he goes on and he talks about his. So about midway through the podcast, he's talking about this weird scenario about what you should do if your parent, if your kid is kind of held at gunpoint. What should you do as a parent? It's this movie that came out, and so he said, he talked to the writer of the movie and why it was such a fascinating scenario, and so back to Gladwell, he says, I reached out to noted neuroscientist Sam Harris and asked him what he thinks we should do. Jesus I kid you not,
Christ.
man. I was
what is
like,
he trying to do to you?
Are you kidding me?
I wonder if his
did he unsubscribe? Did you unsubscribe from the show?
I think you guys might have been responsible when I think y'all mentioned the whole thing with Kanye might have been a result of Rick Rubin, and I was like, wait a second, what's wrong with Rick Rubin? Y'all completely.
No, I know. I like Rick Rubin too.
retweeting,
It might be more Leor Cohen than him, but regardless, I mean, also
wait, what is that?
Yeah,
look
so
up.
anyway,
I just want to say real quick about Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know where he's at now in terms of his politics, but if you look up, Mark Ames wrote a big expose of Malcolm Gladwell. Is this what you have up?
The Shame.
Oh, the Shame Reports. Yeah, it's Mark Ames' stuff on Malcolm Gladwell.
One that I remember seeing is, and I pull it up. Is a document from the mid-1990s named Malcolm Gladwell is one of the tobacco industry's top covert media assets. This roster of third-party advocates was a who's who of list of known corporate shit.
Wow.
The other
I'm really
weird
surprised about
the other
that.
weird
I have
thing
friends
about
who are friends with him.
I have
Malcolm
friends.
Gladwell is always kind of entertaining.
I'm surprised.
Do you see?
Well, I mean that's.
But he was just always very entertaining to me.
Yeah,
but
I wonder if that's not.
nerdery.
I wonder if that's not also a function of like I don't know. At first, my first reaction was like, oh, his podcast numbers must be waning in some fashion, and that's the way you juice him.
I was gonna think maybe Steve Pinker told him to like come to their defense.
That's weird.
Watch Mehdi Hassan's interview on
bizarre.
Al Jazeera with Steve Pinker. That was great.
All right. Well, I appreciate the phone call. That was pretty depressing. Thank you.
Hey, one last thing.
What?
One last thing. Is it Guy Lawson? Anyway, that octopus, the book The Octopus,
Yeah.
is nuts.
It's
I
nuts.
just got to the nuts part, and it's crazy.
Yeah, I know.
So,
I know
anyway,
that.
thanks for the recommendation.
all
That
right.
was awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely worth reading. That is Guy Lawson's Octopus. I remember the moment where that book turns. I remember like I was in bed reading it, and I'm just like, all of a sudden, like the whole story just turns in a moment. And I just looked up and I go, holy shit, this is off the hook. I can't believe this. Yeah. I mean, right. Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh, you haven't read that book? Like for a while it's going along and it reads like, oh, this is just like a classic story of like how sort of corrupt Wall Street is. And like, you know, it was okay. And then all of a sudden it's just like, wait, what? Oh my God, this is insane. True story too. All right. I'm going to read a couple of IMs and then get out of here. Ed, why in our ideal world deporting people who have committed felonies? Possession of bent Metro cards is a felony, even for violent crimes. Isn't the United States, as rich country, better equipped to rehabilitate someone? Again, talking about our ideal world. Train boy, glad to see that Mexicans voted en masse for the candidate with the Green New Deal. Let's keep it going here. Stein 2020. Cadet, go vegan. Cadet in BK, go vegan. Did you see the story? It says Farmer Phil of the pharmacist in Arizona refused to fill a script for his religious beliefs, even though the woman was ending her pregnancy because of miscarriage and not an abortion. She was able to get it filled, but at another store. This has been this is a problem during the Bush years, too, where pharmacists would do this. The boy Polloy, a lesson in British English to accompany news of the Fart Act. For people raised in the UK, the very word Trump has always meant only one thing. It's a loud, vulgar, and particularly uncouth fart. Nice. Doe. Jimmy, please do a vegan or vegetarian version. You can smoke veggies too. Interview James Lowen, author of numerous books on racism, history of lies in America. Kidnapping. The original meaning of kidnap, dating from the late 17th century, was steal children to provide servants to the American colonies.
Wow. So maybe it's, in a certain sense, it's our tradition. Many people are saying it.
Sam's Tinder profile. Hey girl, swipe right. It's scorching, so let's go to the beach and grab a beer while I tell you all about how Michael Bloomberg is an asshole and can't be trusted and he's fucking it all up.
I don't know if that's top Sam agenda right now. People.
Well, he came up the other day.
No, I know he's been up, but like people got to get like some of these people are like they're like 2015, 2014 targets. They're not of the moment.
Well, you know what it was on Friday.
Oh, the Peter King thing.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. But we're also talking about
$80 million
Bloomberg
to Democrats.
Whether Bloomberg would have run if Bernie had won.
Yes, he would have.
Yes,
and he would have done his best to destroy it.
Disco Stew, I think we're missing the bigger impending issue. Can you, though, imagine that, and this must scare Bloomberg, like if Bernie had won and Bloomberg jumped in and brought us Donald Trump, like Bloomberg would be a verb at this point, right? Like, oh, dude, you totally Bloomberg.
I also got to say,
forget about Jill Stein.
I also got to say,
well, no,
I still think the way his demographics line up and the type of people he appeals to, I don't think he would have cost it for Bernie, because I think he would have just his votes are like unless he got so many votes in Westchester that New York became competitive. That dude's not flipping Midwest Rust Belt states.
You don't think there are centrists out there who hate the left more than the right?
not in terms of the type of vote. I'm
It's
talking
not
specifically-
inconceivable.
I'm talking about the
Look,
oh, wait,
Pennsylvania. There's
Maybe
enough
in
of
the
those
suburbs, in the suburbs,
suburban
right.
Republicans.
The
Florida,
opposite-
he wins.
that's possible. That's possible.
Maybe Minnesota, he wins.
Where in Minnesota? Which part of Minnesota?
I just think that Minnesota is like a state where it could have gone.
I'm just saying.
But he doesn't have to win a
this,
state to
I'm
take
just saying,
votes away.
No,
that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying win. I mean,
I
wins
understand
enough
that.
votes to make a
But
difference.
the way this election happened, that really did come down to 75,000, 100,000 votes in the industrial Midwest.
I understand, but
Bernie
it would have been a
win.
different map.
Yeah,
it would have
I
been a
get it.
different map.
Fair enough.
I
understand. We're not arguing.
Pennsylvania still would have gone maybe to Trump in that scenario if you were siphoning
If
off
you got
votes.
the suburbs.
Maybe.
Suburbs, right.
Minnesota, I think, may have gone to Trump if you're siphoning off some of those
Yeah,
votes.
the suburbs. You're right. It just would be a different map.
Disco Stew, I think we're missing the bigger impending issues related to Roe v. Wade, which is this. I truly believe, if I truly believe abortion is murder, I'm not going to just kick it back to the states. I'm going to make it illegal outright. Second, the leaders of the anti-abortion movement aren't just anti-abortion, they're anti-contraception, and they are coming for that too. Keep fighting. Proud to be a Sederista. Thank you. I mean, I think you're right. I just think it's going to come in phases. Mikey, Matt, will you be talking about the science fiction series Dune and Literary Hangover? I've been reading the books over the last year, and they cover many topics like feminism, ecology, social engineering, et cetera, et cetera.
Science fiction is not my strong suit, and I've never read Dune, but I'm open to it if you become a patron.
Whoa.
Fuck yeah. That's exactly. I love it. Get that money, baby. The Michael Brooks method
model.
right here.
Exactly. Nick in Pittsburgh. Another reason billionaires shouldn't exist. Asgardia, the space kingdom. Pet project of delusional Russian billionaire Igor Asherbely, who is the head of Asgardia, which has declared itself a sovereign space nation. You got to look into this lunatic.
Asgardia. At the
Rod
project.
Smoker.
Sounds very Posadist.
There's a lot of ideas there that we're exploring.
Rod Smoker. Anyway, I know you think Supreme Court will undercut Roe v. Wade, but not overturn the ruling. Do you think it allows the GOP to continue driving out their base in opposition to Roe v. Wade? Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I think it's also just sort of like, I mean, look, you have one abortion clinic in North Dakota. There's a couple other states where abortion is in many respects, if not effectively banned, darn close to it. And it's under the radar. Jetro's in blast. There are a lot of terrible things going on in the world today, but I think the biggest tragedy is Michael forcing Sam to work a full 5-day week last week.
I know.
The
horror of it.
The Mobin Salman show. Rogan had Ted Nugent on a show last week. Sounded like the Zuckerberg brisket video. Jimmy Durer. If Democrats take back the Senate, the first thing they should do is just confirm Merrick Garland. We all know they wouldn't, but they should. I say go for a better
why
pick.
would you do
Why
that?
would you go backwards?
Oh my God. What a classic example of how the left choice was also the strategic choice. If Barack Obama, we said it so many times, but if he picked a progressive
Well, but even if you picked
woman of
Merrick
color-
Garland first and Merrick Garland gets rejected, then you pick an African-American woman. Then you pick an Asian.
Do the whole thing.
Yeah, do the whole thing.
Yeah. And now we're doing a bisexual Muslim
exactly.
who doesn't like fat shaming or whatever. Fuck.
Right. Yeah, you just go like, we're going to pick Michael Bloomberg. You just put his name up there.
I will hire a hit squad to murder every single senator.
Then all of a sudden it might actually
The
work.
final item of the day. Can you explain why unions have to represent people who choose not to join and pay dues? That's statutory because, at least in terms of public sector, you have a union shop because from the employer's standpoint, the counties, the state, the municipalities, they only want to negotiate with one entity. Why couldn't the non-union members be required to negotiate their own deals? Perhaps that would show the benefit of membership. I have a feeling that it's quite possible that unions may end up trying to push that. It's unclear. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years, while I shifted